Hello and welcome everybody to the July 30th meeting of the Amherst Planning Board. On tonight's agenda, we have a couple of items before we get to the main event. We have our minutes of July 2nd, 2014 to review and approve. Did anybody on the board have any comments or corrections to the minutes? I hear one comment.
Ha ha ha.
And it was seconded.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiber and Ms. Anderson. Is there any further comment? All in favor? Carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Move to the next item, which is election of officers. We have, I believe, is it 3 or 4 officer positions? We have chair, co-chair, secretary. Is there a 4th?
We have chair, vice chair,
Vice
and
chair.
clerk.
Clerk. Thank you for correcting me. So we have chair, vice chair, and clerk. Currently serving are myself as chair, Stephen Schreiber as vice chair, and Bruce Carson as clerk. Correct?
Yes.
Do we have any nominations?
I'd like to, oh,
I would like to nominate the exact same slate to repeat, because you all do such a great job.
I would second that.
All right.
If all are willing.
I
Mr.
was going
Carson.
to nominate Mr. Stutzman as clerk, if he would be willing to serve, if he's interested.
Is he willing?
see, we have a motion and a second.
So we have the motion for a full slate, and it's been seconded. Are you inclined to withdraw that motion, or
And
Alter
we're
it.
having discussion. I could withdraw that motion, revise it,
you could revise it?
but I haven't heard from Mr. Stutzman.
I'm happy to serve as clerk.
So I'll repeat a new motion. The chair and the vice chair remain the same, and the clerk migrates to Mr. Stutzman. I probably should have this. Yep, that one, it's tied.
All right.
We get that one on this one.
Yeah.
And do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Carson. I believe that in this matter, people can vote for themselves, so if they wish to do so. Is there any further discussion? All right, all in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Carson, for your service as clerk, and welcome, Mr. Stutzman. Thank you. Thank you also, Mr. Schreiber, for your services.
And to Mr. Weber,
Mr.
yeah,
Weber.
while we're
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so,
maybe premature, but thank you so much for your,
on second thought,
yeah.
okay, let's move on. It's 7:05. We're here tonight on a definitive subdivision plan for the retreat. In accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 41, and the Town of Amherst Rules and Regulations governing the subdivision of land, this public hearing has been duly advertised and notice has been posted in the Town Hall and also sent to abutters. The hearing is being held to provide the opportunity for interested citizens to be informed about and to comment on this proposed definitive subdivision plan application. Subdivision number 2014-00002/M23945, Retreat at Amherst LLC, Henry Street, Market Hill Road, and Flat Hills Road, requesting approval for a 136-lot definitive subdivision plan for a cluster subdivision in accordance with Section 4.3 of the Amherst zoning bylaw and Mass General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 81T, Map 6A, parcels 84, 91, 95, and 96 in the RN and RO zoning district. Do we have any board member disclosures on this matter? Hearing none. I would just like to thank you all for coming here tonight. I would like to remind everyone that the acoustics in this room are problematic at best, and so anything we can do to keep the room quiet will certainly help everyone to understand and hear all the proceedings. As you know, the Retreat at Amherst LLC is proposing to construct 175 cottage-style student housing units on this 148-acre site. It's being proposed as a cluster subdivision, and that's pursuant to Section 4.3 of the Amherst zoning bylaw. This project first came before the planning board on a preliminary subdivision plan and a public hearing on that plan last December. After that hearing, the board proposed 20 recommendations and changes to the plan. This hearing is the next step in a long process that involves many other permits. We expect to receive a site plan application in early September. The Conservation Commission is also conducting its own review. The Planning Board received this definitive plan on May 28th and must render a decision within 90 days of that date, which means by August 26th, unless the applicant agrees to an extension. As you know, the plan documents submitted by the applicant were posted on the town website beginning last month. We have all been reviewing them, as have many of you. We also received a large number of written comments, which have been extremely helpful in identifying potential issues with this proposal. Thank you. Tonight, the applicant will present their project, focusing primarily on any changes from the preliminary plan. We will then hear from the Planning Board's technical consultant, Fuss & O'Neill, which was hired to review and comment on some of the more technical aspects of the plan. Planning Board members and town staff should feel free to raise their hand and ask questions during either the applicant's presentation or the presentation from our consultant. After that, we will have a public comment period. The board will not be voting on this plan tonight because the board has additional business to conduct after the hearing. We're going to stop this hearing at 10 o'clock. Our expectation is that this hearing will be continued until next Wednesday, August 6th at 7 p.m., probably 7:05. At that meeting, there will be additional time for public comment, and a consultant for the neighborhood group, Save Historic Cushman, will be presenting its own findings. It's also possible that the hearing will be continued to yet another night. So, with that said, let's bring the applicant forward and welcome. Please tell us who you are and tell us about your plan.
Excuse me.
Ms. Brestrup.
I just wanted to note that you do have another application on next week. So the way the agenda will actually be structured is that there's a discussion of zoning for the first half hour, then an application by Elm Electric to make a small change on Amherst College property, and then this application could be continued to 7:45 or something like that, if that suits you.
Thank you. Mr. Reedy?
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations on your reappointment. Congratulations, Mr. Stutzman, on your new appointment. Members of the board, Mr. Tucker, Ms. Brestrup, I'm Tom Reedy. I'm an attorney with Bacon Wilson here in Amherst, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant in this definitive subdivision plan. With me this evening, I've got the site engineer, Tony Wanseski of SVE Associates out of Greenfield. Also, the developer, the Senior Vice President for Development, Jason Dornbos of Landmark Properties. And also, as part of the legal team, also from Bacon Wilson, Attorney Peter McConnell. So I think Mr. Chairman did a very good job in giving some background and context, and I'd like to do essentially the same and go a step further before I turn it over to Tony for the presentation proper. So about 1.5 years ago, the developer had interest in coming to Amherst because of the need for housing. They met with town officials, they met with neighbors and interested parties at the Jones Library and had a discussion. Then they attempted to, and successfully, remove the land from forest land classification for residential use. It was a change of use, and it's for residential purposes. Fast forward to October 28th, we submitted the preliminary plan to the town. On, I think it was December 4th, we had the hearing, and December 10th, we've received a letter with some recommendations. Based on what we heard at the hearing and what was included in the letter, we've redesigned the subdivision, as you'll see this evening, or probably already have seen. We've included a 100-foot building circle in each of the, in almost each of the lots. The off-street parking for the dwellings has been included on the sites, along with appropriately placed parallel parking spaces. We have reduced the total number of parking spaces by 10%, and we've substantially reduced the length of roadways exceeding 8% grade. Even though we've redesigned the project, we are still requesting some waivers from the town subdivision rules and regulations. And the waiver process is natural in the subdivision context. It's allowed under state law, and it's allowed under the subdivision rules and regulations. It's a mechanism that allows the town and the applicant to work out a reasonable and acceptable design. And it's important to note that waivers are not variances. They're specifically built in to provide some relief from the strict compliance with those regulations. The town has done it in other subdivisions. They've done it at Amherst Hills. They've allowed the waiver of sidewalks on both sides to allow sidewalks on just one side of the street, and they allowed 28 waivers for South Middle Street Cluster Subdivision, and that was in 2006. And some of those waivers were for exceeding the maximum grade of the roadway and also exceeding the 800-foot cul-de-sac requirement. So the town is familiar with doing this, and it's not unusual in the subdivision context at all. So this evening, what we're going to do is we've got a definitive subdivision plan, and we're going to look at the road layout, grading, drainage, utility design, and stormwater management. Infrastructural technical aspects. We've got a representative from Fuss & O'Neill here. We did receive their report slightly before we came here this evening, so we've had a difficult time in responding. We were able to go through it. We'd like to have further discussions with that firm to try to hash out what the issues are and what the resolutions may be. And so we're really going to focus on the infrastructure, and that's what Tony's here to do. As the chairman mentioned, we're going to be submitting a site plan review within the coming months. September is when we're looking to do it, and that's where we're going to deal with management, operation, and the use. While you're able to look at the use, we would suggest that look at it as a residential use instead of commercial or industrial, and that's what should color the infrastructural aspects of this project, the infrastructural systems, because residential is obviously going to be different from commercial or industrial. So there will be a time to discuss the management, the operation, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, which in a homeowners association, which the board discussed at the preliminary plan meeting, those will be provided at the site plan review, with the site plan review submission, along with landscaping, the exterior, the buildings, lighting, and some more specific details about the aesthetics of the site, the fabric of the site. And with that, I'll hand it over to Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Reedy.
Good evening. Tony Wincescu with SV Associates in Greenfield, acting as a local engineer for the retreat at Amherst. We put together slide or PDF here that will show you graphically some of the aspects of the project as we've gone from preliminary plan phase to the definitive plan phase. The applicant, as mentioned before, is Landmark Properties. The project is called the Retreat in Amherst. The main primary consultant team is SVE Associates in Greenfield, Mass., and Williams Associates from Athens, Georgia. This is a location map showing the Coles property. It's approximately 147.3 acres. You'll see that it's changed slightly from the preliminary plan because there was a lot down in this corner here that was not part of the preliminary plan but is now part of the subdivision boundary. You'll also note that the property fronts on Henry Street, on Market Hill. This mouse is a little jumpy here, but Market Hill, and then over on Flat Hills. You also know, and I'm going to go to another screen here. You'll notice that this site also has a utility easement, which is where the mouse is. The town water treatment plant is up on the northwest corner of the property. There are numerous wetlands and a few intermittent streams on the property. We're in the process of going through an ANRAD process with the Conservation Commission to confirm the delineation of the wetlands and also to classify the streams, as our opinion is they are intermittent and not perennial. That process is ongoing. We expect the town to have hired a third-party reviewer to go through that process with us. You'll see that the property is fairly wooded. It was harvested for timber back in 2010 and 2011, I believe. So there is new growth, but nothing of a mature forest there except in certain areas. The next slide shows, which is a requirement of the subdivision to go through a yield plan process, which we did for the preliminary plan, and it's the same here for the definitive plan. I just want everyone on the board to know, and the public, that these wetlands that are shown on these plans are wetlands that have been delineated by our professional wetlands biologist and located in the field by SVE Associates. So they're not conceptual, they are actually delineated in the field and will be confirmed by the town and their third-party consultant. You'll know that there's two zones here, the RN zone, they're smaller lots that front Henry Street, and once you go beyond, or the easement to the east, you'll be in the RO zone, which is an outlying residential area. The lots are larger. These are 30,000 square foot lots, and there are two methods for determining yield in the town. One is a straight density calculation, which we provide, and through the RO and RN calculations that are outlined in the zoning bylaw, you would be able to build 196 lots. The zoning bylaw goes farther and says that you have to look at other constraints, which would be wetlands, easements, and so forth, to determine actually what you could be built on the property. We've done that with this plan, and our design shows that we could reasonably create 123 residential lots. With this, you would get about 39.31 acres of open space that would be dedicated lots to the town, and open space easements on the back of residential lots that would not be constructed or developed and be left in a natural state or manufactured vegetated state. So that equates to 19.15 acres. So that's a breakdown in the yield, how we then went forward to generate a preliminary plan, which is a cluster, asking for modifications which are allowed for in Note K of the density regulations. You'll see that we had some cul-de-sacs and so forth that were longer than 800. But in this case, and the reason why I believe the town is looking to have more of a cluster development, you get to keep more natural land and provide more open space. As you can see, this is 123 lots, but in this case, we get 89.1 acres of open space, and that equates to 75.57 acres of dedicated lot to the town for open space, and another 13.61 acres of open space, which is areas that are not needed for the development of the cottages. So you see a significant reduction in the amount of developable area. This was brought to the board, and recommendations were presented to us as we had gone through the process. And in going through and designing the definitive plan, we have come up with this concept, or this definitive plan, for which we'll be reviewing as we move forward. You'll see the 147.3 acres. It's a standard cluster here of 15,000 square foot for residential lot, single family, and then an additional 10,000 for duplex, which would equate to a 25,000 square foot lot. Frontages are 100 foot. We are asking for some modifications which are allowed by Note K, really in areas where there are curved streets, and we provide the 100-foot building circle with this design in keeping with the town's bylaw. You'll notice that there are 175 dwelling units. 71 of those are single-family units, 104 are duplexes. That's 175 units total. The density equates to 1.19 dwelling units per acre. The open space in this scenario is 86.12 acres, and that's a combination of dedicated lots of 75.36 acres and open space easement area of 10.76. You'll see that with this cluster versus the preliminary plan, the amount of open space does reduce slightly, but is still provides significantly more open space than the yield plan or standard subdivision plan. The developed area here would be 61.1 acres. And some specifics on this plan, which I'd like to take note, the wetlands areas you'll see by this definite designation on the plan. These, again, are flagged and surveyed wetlands. The reason why the cluster is such a good design here is even though we have less open space up here than we did with the preliminary plan, you still have large amounts of contiguous open space, and what we're trying to provide here are the wildlife corridors as we did with the preliminary plan. You can see that these all tie together, and over here you've got another one, and also through this area. You'll also notice this red hatching. This is non-breeding salamander habitat area. In our initial discussions with the abutters and the town staff, we know that the salamanders have been a cultural focal point of the town, especially the Cushman area. We have the two salamander tunnels that were constructed, and so before we even started to design this, in our preliminary plan, we commissioned a biologist by the name of Stephen Johnson to go out and transect this and determine the non-breeding habitat. And we do have a habitat assessment for that. That will be submitted along with our MEPA documents in the submittal of an environmental notification form requesting a certificate from the state. So we just thought you would like to see that on this plan. Most of this breeding habitat is west of the non-breeding habitat is west of the power line, and the breeding habitat is actually in the wetland area on the west side of Henry Street. You'll also notice that these brown sections are crossings, which are wetland crossings, and there are 7 of them, I believe, now. The preliminary plan had 2. These areas will be crossed and be done in conformance with the stream crossing standards of the state, and will be structurally designed to handle emergency vehicles and large vehicles for, transporting furniture and all of those things for move-ins and other things that are required when you do a residential subdivision. You'll also notice on this plan that there are areas for trails and connections between the streets. One of the things that came through from the preliminary plan work is having some connections from the end of the cul-de-sacs to other parts within the subdivision. So you'll see that we've tried to do that. The Robert Frost Trail traverses the northern part of the property. We will be rerouting that slightly through the subdivision and then tying back in. The subdivision here, getting out to Flat Hills, if you go approximately 1,000 feet to the north by the GIS, you get to the Walt Whitman Trail. So there's interconnectivity for trails and pedestrian use, and this is the new layout that we came up based on the recommendations from the preliminary plan review. Some of the project features I'll reiterate is the large areas of continuous preserved open space. These areas will be dedicated to the town, I believe, as part of the Chapter 61 process that we went through. Wildlife corridors are being maintained with this cluster subdivision. We're trying very minimally to impact any environmental sensitive areas, whether it be the salamanders or just the wetland areas and the wildlife corridors. We trail connect to the Robert Frost Trail and also on the Cushman Market. We originally were talking about doing two general sidewalks of 5-foot width. After the preliminary plan, we elected to do some areas of a 5-foot walk, but most areas of multi-use paved walk, which is 8 foot in diameter, 8 foot in width, which could allow both pedestrian and bicycle use and not have to be on the private road. Provide private trash collection, which is a requirement in town. Privately managed roads, storm drains, lighting, and landscaping. With this development, we will be asking the town to take the sewer and water as public facilities, but the remainder of the road infrastructure, the storm drains, lighting, landscaping would be maintained private and managed by the developer. Designs, and if there are concerns as far as the water and sewer being public, we will be providing, and when I get to the section I'll show you, we'll be granting easements over what would typically be the street right-of-way for access for the town to maintain those facilities. The project promotes bus use. There is bus use that on Henry Street, and if the project continues forward, we'll be looking to see if we can get PVTA to come actually through the site. We would be providing 2 bus stops within the project for students or residents to catch a bus to go to downtown. And they're located at the north and south end of the project so that it's easily for the residents to get to a bus stop. Public access to utility easements, as I mentioned before, and also the wetland crossings. This is a typical cross-section of the private roads. You'll see that we have a 50-foot right-of-way, and that would be also the easement that would be granted to the town over that entire area. Multi-use path, 8 foot wide, and most sections we have landscape or tree belt from the walk to the road. This also provides snow storage when you plow the roads. We originally had straight-in parking with our preliminary plan. We revised that to provide parallel parking at locations along the road with 6% or less grade. We also provide secondary walks with units fronting the road. All utilities are underground and as provided and required per the code. We are requesting building setbacks to go from 20 to 10. Like I said, these are cluster. We don't see the need to push those back farther, trying to create a theme within this development. This is a typical landscaping and placement. You see a duplex and you see a single family. We are looking at shared parking so we can cut down on the number of driveways that would be needed to service these lots with parking shared. Here's a place for the parallel parking. You'll see that there'll be landscaped tree belt or parkway for snow storage. There's landscaping typical shown around each of these cottages, and snow storage would be at the back of the parking lot. So this gives you an idea of what a typical landscaping would be around the units. Revisions to the development plan per the preliminary plan recommendations. You'll see that with this plan, it's more definitive so that we've added the streetlights through the development. We've changed the proposed pavement from 24 to 22 foot width as we've gone recommended from the requested and recommended from our preliminary plan. We provided paved multi-use path along the streets. We've provided trail connections between the cul-de-sacs, the existing trails in Cushman Market. We limited the length of the cul-de-sacs to 800 feet or less. All lots contain the 100-foot building circle. We limited 10% street grades to 200-foot sections. We've maintained the 4% street grade within 100 foot of the intersections. And I'll clarify that a little bit in discussions with the DPW. The minor streets, will be stop sign regulated. That shows on the site plan that's included with the definitive subdivision. Those areas on the minor streets are 4% back for 100 feet. The major street, because they're stop control, the major street is not 4% within the 100 and is not required. We did go over this with the DPW, and so that this street is designed as was discussed with them. And if that's a little confusing, I'll try to answer that later if there are questions. Converted on-street parking, straight-in parking to parallel parking. We reduced the number of parking spaces, as Tom mentioned earlier, by about 10%. Actually, it's a little more, I believe. We provided handicap spaces in the amenity office hall. We are extending the proposed sewer to Flat Hills Road. This, as you look at the review letter from the DPW, you'll see that this is something that's beneficial to the town. In our design, we've also, by providing some deep sewer, reduced the sanitary lift stations to 1, where we had 2 with a preliminary plan. It's my understanding that this might be an issue with the DPW and will be revisited with them. If the deep sewer is a problem and they don't want to have that, then we will look to possibly having another pump station in there to solve that problem. But those will be discussions that we will have with the DPW. We've also provided some representative architecture of what the cottages might look like in this subdivision, so that the board and the public can get an idea of what they would look like. Don't look at the straight-in parking, because we don't have those anymore. We have parallel parking or no parking in front of the cottages. Some things that came out of the, some recommendations that came out of the traffic impact analysis, and we'll be going further on with those when we're dealing with the peer reviewer for this project, Fuss and O'Neill. Initial recommendations from our traffic consultant were that the East Pleasant Street northbound approach would be widened to accommodate a separate right turn lane or dedicated lane onto Pine Street. And this was already depicted on the town's Pine Street reconstruction project. The intersection mitigation enhancement measures for the following intersections: Henry Street at Pine Street, Bridge Street at Market Hill, Bridge Street at Pine Street, East Pleasant Street at Pine Street, Henry Street at Shutesbury Road, and North Pleasant Street at Pine Street would require some new pavement markings and some new signage. And then also the final recommendation that came out was to install some guardrail and replace it along Henry Street. Let you know that prior to doing our traffic study, we did meet with the DPW to scope the study area, which intersections would be reviewed, what type of study would be prepared, and we prepared that study in accordance with those early scoping meetings. And I believe that concludes my presentation on the definitive subdivision.
Thank you, Mr. Wozzeski. Anything further as far as other presentations from the applicant?
Not at this point.
All right. Well, before we get to any specific questions from the board, I think I'd like to go ahead and hear from our consultant, Fuss and O'Neill. So, if you wouldn't mind coming forward.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Steve Severia. I'm a professional engineer and senior project manager at the firm of Fuss and O'Neill of West Springfield. Our firm has been retained by the town to be the town's third-party peer review technical consultant on the review of the definitive subdivision. We have initiated our review of the subdivision application, and we did prepare a memo of some preliminary comments, just reflecting some issues that came out of our initial review, which I'm here to discuss tonight. The first part of the review concerns dimensional zoning issues, all of which I'm sure the board is familiar with in terms of the relationship of the subdivision plan to the actual zoning bylaw. The first comments deal with common land and open space, and the plans do show common land, and they do indicate some open space, but it's not clear how much of the common land is actually designated as open space and what the breakdown is. Also, it appears that some of the open space land may contain some of the utility easements. There may be some of the open space land that is designated as wetlands, which is not in accordance with the regulations. So we just requested that those areas be delineated and clarified. There are open space easements over that actually are over the individual house lots, and it's not clear to us that that meets the definition of open space, required open space within the bylaw. There are a number of comments regarding frontage. As it was presented, the board has discretion in terms of modifying frontage requirements, but the plan as it stands now, there are a number of lots that don't meet the 100-foot frontage requirement, so that that would require a modification of that requirement in order for those lots to be approved. It looks like there's also requests to waive or modify the 20-foot front yard setback requirement, and the plans as shown have a 10-foot setback. There is one lot that. There are also a number of lots that are requesting to use 5-foot side yard instead of the required 15-foot setback, and we have listed those. There is one lot, number 43, that doesn't appear to meet the requested 5-foot side yard setback. Sorry. There is one lot, as noted on the staff review, that is designated as a duplex lot, but is not the required 25,000 minimum square foot area. There are a few lots that the 100-foot circle is not contained within the lot lines. The circle is actually shown crossing the lot line, so those would have to be modified in order for the 100-foot building circle to be contained within the lots. The parking requirement is for a maximum of 2 parked vehicles to be allowed in the front yard setback. Right now, with the 10-foot front yard setback, that requirement is met. But if the waiver of the 20-foot setback is not granted, then there will be a lot of excess parking within the front yards, because that's where most of the parking areas are. There's a requirement for common drive slope not exceeding 5%, and there are some areas where it appears the common drives and parking areas exceed 5%. There's one lot that doesn't show any driveway or parking area, so that would have to be modified to show parking. And that is the extent of our kind of preliminary dimensional zoning review. The next part of the review pertains to the traffic impact study, and this is a little bit more in-depth in terms of the completeness of the review of the traffic impact study. In general, the traffic impact study was prepared in accordance with standard practice. It is, we consider it to be complete and accurate for what it presents, and does meet the scope requirements as established by the town engineer. It does make reference to the Pine Street reconstruction project. The impact analysis recommendations refer to improvements at the East Pleasant Street and Pine Street intersection, which are part of that project. That project, I believe, is unfunded at this point. I know the town is pursuing the development of that project, and it will continue, but the time frame of it, I think, is undefined at this point. So I think any required improvements, mitigation improvements for the traffic analysis should, the mitigation should be committed to by the project proponents. In other words, it should be a condition of the approval for those required improvements to be made. And that's pretty consistent with what the MEPA process would require. They would have to provide not only a commitment to mitigation, but some kind of conceptual design to demonstrate the feasibility of the improvements. There was no crash rate analysis provided. There are accident records contained in the report, so we can see the numbers, the raw numbers of accidents at different locations, but there isn't a comparison of how the rate of occurrence of those crashes compares to, say, a regional average for intersections. So we would like to see that crash rate analysis presented. It would be a lot easier in terms of our review if a figure showing the geographic distribution of the assumed geographic distribution of the proposed peak hour trips was provided. There are figures showing where the actual numbers of peak hour trips are going to and coming from, but in order to quantify and kind of check those numbers, we would like to see a figure showing the directional distribution percentages. We have a concern regarding the trip generation methodology. We do agree in concept with the assumed trip generation methodology of using the counts from the Puffton Village apartments, creating a rate per bed based on that data. But we do note, and I think it needs to be accounted for, the fact that Puffton Village is less than a mile from the UMass campus. And if there is going to be a student population in the project, then I think there's also very good transit service available. I think the rate of vehicle ownership, the use of transit, and the availability of non-vehicular travel to Puffton Village should be taken into account. In other words, I believe that the Puffton Village rates are probably somewhat low and need to be adjusted based on those factors. And Institute of Transportation Engineers and their standard trip generation methodology does provide some guidance on assessing sites that have less or more transit available to them in generating the type of traffic. The actual capacity analysis, which analyzes the operational performance of intersections, was done in accordance with standard methodology. We would just like to see some more data presented, especially for the signalized intersection, while delay is the average delay per vehicle is the kind of the operative quantified measured of performance. We'd like to see the volume to capacity ratio as well. That's always helpful in looking at unsignalized intersections. There were two different analysis methodologies used in the analysis. The unsignalized intersections were analyzed using what's called the HCM software, which is a standard analysis methodology. The signalized intersections were analyzed using Synchro, which is also a standard accepted methodology, but the results that were published in the report, Synchro uses its own level of service calculation that is not consistent with HCM. It is possible to get those HCM level of service reports out of the Synchro analysis, so we would like to see both sets of output from the signalized analysis. There could be a concern at the Market Hill and Henry and Bridge Street intersection just because of the potential for queuing impacts from the intersection interfering with the actual site driveway. And so we would like to see some analysis of the queuing there to make sure that the driveway is not going to be actually blocked by queued stop vehicles from the intersection. There's a simulation routine that you can run with Synchro that is actually very helpful in showing the interaction between different intersections that may be helpful in helping us evaluate that condition. And of course, it's noted here that the East Pleasant Street and Pine Street intersection really warrants mitigation under the proposed conditions. The traffic that the development is going to add to that intersection is really going to reduce the capacity for left turns out of East Pleasant Street, to the extent where level of service is going to degrade to F. That's a condition warranting improvement. Level of service F at an unsignalized intersection would really start to indicate a safety concern, because drivers would tend to accept smaller than normal gaps in the through traffic stream in order to make their turns, and that then becomes a safety concern. So the report does mention that intersection is part of the Pine Street reconstruction project, and improvements to that intersection are part of what has been developed for the design of those improvements to date by the town. But once again, standard impact mitigation would kind of dictate that those impacts be fully mitigated as part of the project, rather than to rely on an improvement project by the town. The proponents have noted that there is transit service to the site, but it would make sense, and they are pursuing the enhancement or increase in transit service to the site to serve the population there. There is transit service in the vicinity of the site, but the current schedule would not be conducive to what would probably be a student population, because there's only 3 pickups and drop-offs per day currently on that route. So that route would have to be expanded and increased in frequency in order to serve the population and provide a measurable decrease in the vehicle use by the residents. The project does address pedestrian and bicycle usage within the site. There are measures and elements of the site design that address pedestrian and bicycle access. There's a question whether all of the pedestrian facilities would be ADA accessible, especially when it comes to intersection crossing areas due to the steep grades through the intersections. The current accessibility regulations require that even crosswalk areas across streets, across roadways, have a maximum cross slope that's consistent with a walking path or an accessible path of travel.
What slope is that?
I believe it's 2%.
Thank you.
So that it would become necessary to kind of plateau those intersections and flatten them out in order to provide those accessible crossing areas. The 8-foot wide multi-use path is not up to current standards for a multi-use path for shared use by bicycles and pedestrians. We're seeing now that the Norwalk Rail Trail is being upgraded for this very reason, that the original 8-foot wide path is not sufficiently wide. And so 10 feet would be the minimum. So I would leave it to the board as to whether the use of this path would mandate having a standard 10-foot width path. If transit service becomes available internally through the site, we would want to see some actual bus stop areas defined with bus pull-offs and shelters. And I guess the main question main concern we have about steep grades through intersections is that it makes them particularly more difficult to negotiate safety, especially when making turning movements. It's our opinion that the minimum 4% within 100 feet should be maintained for all intersections. And that's the extent of our initial review. We still have it within our scope to be looking at utilities, stormwater management, and in general, the kind of grading and land disturbance on the site. And so we will be providing more detailed review of these issues as we move forward with the review.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Severia. If you don't mind sticking around, we may have some questions for you as we proceed along.
I will be here.
Thank you. All right. Before we get to any, first of all, all right, I guess I'll open it up for questions from the board and from town staff. I will mention that the staff prepared an extensive and detailed development application report, preliminary development application report, which lays out a lot of the concerns that were identified by the consultant as well as some different ones. If you don't have that, I believe it's available at the back of the room, or it's certainly available online if we run out of copies. So what I'm going to do is try and guide our board questions just by walking through the development application report so that we have some structure to the order in which we ask questions. So the first section relating to this that we should be asking questions probably about, I'll start by identifying the waivers that have been requested by the applicant. And this is section 3 on page 4 of the DAR. Waiver of setback requirements under footnote A of table 3. And the staff has also identified that the applicant may need but has not requested a waiver of frontage requirements for certain lots under footnote K of table 3. We also have waivers requested from the subdivision rules, which include a waiver for the 8% grade requirement on roadways, waiver of the requirement for minimum horizontal curves, waiver of the requirement for the, well, actually, the applicant has not requested but may need waiver of the requirement for maximum length of 800 feet for a cul-de-sac, and waiver of the requirement for maximum grade of 4% within 100 feet of an intersection. And we'll address those waivers in the context of the various sections of the EAR. The roadways are the next section, so I'm just going to open it up for questions from the board on the roads. Anybody want to get us started? Mr. Stutzman.
So our consultant from Fuss & O'Neill, thank you for that presentation. You mentioned the PVTA transit service and that there was a proposal that perhaps in the future there'll be extended bus service, and you expressed a concern about lack of provision of bus stops. But in your written statement, you also mentioned a concern about intersection geometries. Now, does that fall under the same concerns you already mentioned in regards to the general designs, or are there more specific requirements for buses that you hadn't mentioned?
No, that does not have to do with bus access, I believe, with intersections.
I'm sorry, Mr. I've got to, Severia, I've got to ask you to use the microphone. And you can, if you'd like, you can remain at that seat. I don't know whether you may need to pass the microphone to your left to the applicant as we proceed. But
Okay.
we're short on mics, so thank you.
Our stated concerns regarding intersection geometry is not related to bus access. The intersections, if designed in accordance with subdivision standards, are suitable for, but I think in terms of horizontal geometry, I think that my stated concern about grading an intersection would then would apply for bus operations as well. Sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Rosnoy.
Mr. Severie, I wasn't quite clear on the meaning of your comments about the 10-foot frontage setback that's been requested as opposed to the 20-foot setback and its implication on front setback parking for 2 cars. Could you clarify that, please?
The requirement is for a maximum of 2 cars to park within the front yard setback. And the request is for a waiver of that setback from 20 feet to 10 feet. And in pretty much all cases, the maximum of 2 vehicles parked within that front yard setback is met with the current plan as long as that waiver is granted. If the waiver of the front yard setback is not granted and then the setback remains at 20 feet, then there will be a lot more parking, much more than 2 spaces per lot within that front yard setback. It's just because that's the way the parking is oriented towards the front of the site.
I see. So that would be on a practical basis. If there were larger setbacks, there would be more parking.
Yes, there will be more parking within them, yes. Yeah.
So would the applicant like to
Didn't wanna
speak to
go
that
back.
issue? Or try to, I think, were you clear on that, how that works?
Well, it was. I guess I had a follow-up question. I mean, with the 10-foot setback, fitting 2 cars per unit, in a 10-foot setback? Is that practicable?
Yes, it is. The way, this thing just has a mind of its own, doesn't it?
does. It's an active mouse.
Wow.
Trying to get back to that.
So I won't use the mouse if we ever get this back.
You might try using the keyboard, I guess, to page up
try
and
that.
page down, see if it'll stop it.
Maybe just disengage it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you note the way that the parking is set up on these lots is that we have a shared access drive, and then there's a parking area at right angles to the shared access drive or parallel to the street as you inside the lots. So if you can imagine that front setback line, you know, kind of being even with the front of that parking area, well, there's no parking shown within the front setback. I don't think that's the case with all of the lots on the definitive plan. Some of them do show parking within that front setback. But if the front setback was double that, then that would get it back into those parking areas, and so you'd have a lot more parking spaces contained within that front yard area.
So in other words, if we slide the frontage, or sorry, if we slide that setback back, it pushes up into that hammerhead-shaped
Right.
parking lot,
Right.
thereby including one or more spaces on either side.
Exactly. So if the front setback is here, then there's no parking within it, but if it's back here, then there might be 4 spaces within it.
And in addition, I believe we would need to include the parallel parking that's also within the setback, or is that not included? That's not included, okay. All right, thank you. Moving along, about the roads, I mean, let's get right to it. There's some really steep grades here. So we had asked the applicant in our letter to reduce the number of grades over 8%, and they did reduce them. In the original plan, and I could look for the number, but there was a large number of greater extent, so of steep grades. However, we still do have, as identified by by town staff, on Road A, which is a secondary road, it exceeds 8% for a total of 440 feet, which is two sections, one of 240 feet, one of 200 feet. And then it also has 2 sections where it exceeds 4% within 100 feet of its intersections. Road B has 4 separate sections that exceed 8% grade. And Road D has a single section that exceeds 8% in the amount of 240 feet. By my math, we're talking something around 900 linear feet of road that exceed 8% grade. We've heard a lot of concerns. You know, certainly the 8% grade is what's considered by the subdivision bylaw to be a safe grade for the operation of motor vehicles. And, you know, we have snow here. So the question is, can you get a car up a 10% grade in the snow? Does it raise the risk of cars sliding backwards, sliding off the road? And I will say, especially in relation to some of the cuts that are involved and retaining walls that are proposed, I would like to hear the applicant speak to the safety of these proposed 10% grades, please.
You can leave your stuff there, Steve, that's fine.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Carson.
could we see on the graphic, could they point out where these grades are, especially to see them?
Yes, that would be very helpful.
Oh, boy. That might be a little difficult with these graphics to point those sections out. I could probably do that in a few minutes, but let me just talk to the 10%. In the preliminary plan, we did have more sections of 10%, as you recall. With a waiver, it does say to, I'm going to go back to the report here. It says maximum grade shall be 8%, as much as 10% for shorter distances. And I thought when we went through, our opinion is when we went through the preliminary process, that shorter distance would be 200 feet. So you can see that when we redesign the roads, A is the major, the larger road, because it goes from Flat Hills down to Market Hill. There are two sections that are at 10% for 240 and 200. Those are in two different locations, and the remainder of the road is at 8% or less. This is done because of the topography and the grading. To bring them down to 8% just causes more grading, and we elected to do this. And I will say that that is safe for this area. If you go back, and our original preliminary plan was, we tried to look at some documents such as a sustainable neighborhood road design. It's a guide for mass towns and cities. This was prepared in 2011, and it was sponsored by the American Planning Association and also the Home Builders Association of Massachusetts, where they say 10% for conventional subdivision is typical, and for 12% for grade for an open space subdivision, which we would consider a cluster. So we never pushed it beyond the 10, but we had longer stretches of a 10. Based on the preliminary plan and the recommendations, we shortened those significantly in many sections. So we feel that the 10% in those limited sections are what more planning design and guides are now, and we feel that they are safe. So I hope that answers the question on that and where we are today. To find out those locations where they are, you'll have to give me a minute because I don't have the plan and profiles in the slides.
While you're looking, I'll call on Ms. Brestrup.
I believe we can get to those profiles through the town website, which is available from Mr. Wodzeski's desk, and I can help him if you would let me.
That would be good, thank you. So those profiles were provided to us in our packets, and the board members have had an opportunity to observe those. I'm not sure if the consultant's time dealing with this has been very short thus far, and the scope of his review has been limited. We're certainly hoping that that's something that he can address when he has time to do so, but I understand you're not prepared, probably not prepared to address that today, except in a general way. So, Ms. Ford.
So this is a little, I'm moving back from because when you started going through the development application report, you kind of went right to the waivers, and I'm curious about when or if there is going to be a discussion about the proposed use of the property, because I think the whole discussion or potential for discussing that has changed based on how we're receiving applications, and so
why don't you go ahead and explain what your concern is?
Well, I think that there's a lot of concern. I think that's a lot of what we're hearing back from concerned citizens, most of the letters, a lot of the documentation that we've been looking at and getting references to are questioning, actually, the use of, how this is being planned as a residential use. And I would go so far as to say, well, yes, it's residential, but it's not typical residential.
Right.
It's just, there's nothing typical about this as a typical residential. So I think that this discussion needs to be had, and I don't want to usurp the process that we're doing here, but
Nope.
It was number 2 in here, and I was just wondering if we were going to come back to that. Or
Sure, I guess I was focused on what the consultant had a chance to help us with, but we can certainly take a step back to that.
Well, yeah, because
Let's do that.
Okay.
I agree with you, and I skipped that on purpose because I thought we'd come back to it, but we can certainly go in any order that the board prefers to go in. let's go ahead and look at the road profiles and finish up with the grades, and then we'll go back to the use issues, if that'll be okay.
Thank you.
There you go. Very good. There we go. Yeah. I think so.
Thank you, Ms. Brestrup.
So the first area, I believe, I don't know if we can blow this up. Can we zoom in here on this?
I don't think so.
Okay, I think this is 9%, and it goes from 654 to 891. It's this stretch right in here. So if you come off of Market Hill, the existing driveway, this is the driveway to the treatment plant, and you come up and you cross this area here, and as you start to go up here is where you get that 9%. That's reflected here.
So that's just as you're coming in, okay.
It's coming in. So there's that section there. And then I believe the other section is, this is Road A. Is this section right here? I believe, or is it right here? I can't see if that's 10 or bottom one. So it'd be this little section right here. That distance right there.
So the way that this works is we can extend those lines up along the drawing and determine that in that area, there's what, 4 houses on each side of the street approximately during that area?
Yeah, I guess so. Yes, I would say that.
So it's safe to say that the slopes of the driveways entering from that will also be canted at 10% as they enter the driveway, and then it would flatten out in the parking lot?
That's correct.
Is the parking lot also going to be tilted at 10%?
Well, it will for grade purposes, but no, not at 10%. No.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so that's the 2 sections on Road A.
Yep.
Road B. Okay, Road B, coming off of Road A, we've got to climb up. This is where we'll be setting the reservoir. It'll be up off of Road, I believe it's C. But we have a climb here, which is here at 10%. Then we go 8%, and then we climb a little again for a short distance to get up to the top.
So this is the access road to the northern loop, yeah?
This is the access road to the northern loop, yes. But you can see as this intersection comes off, that 4% for 100 feet is required by the subdivision regulations. So these are the 2 sections, I believe, that were pointed out. Actually, there were 3, 11, 7. So you got to go to the next sheet for the continuation over the top. I'll show
Ms.
you those are
Brestrup?
small, right here.
I just wanted to ask about the intersection of Road B and C, and I think it's at station, can't quite read it, I think it says 7 plus 86.11.
I believe that's correct.
It looks like the intersection of Road C and B has Road B running at 10% at that intersection.
That would be correct, because that is the major road. Road C would be the minor. Road C would be stop controlled, and Road C, and I'll show you that. We'll get to Road C, that we come off of Road B at 4% or less for 100. I'll have to get to that to see if it's actually at 4%. I believe it is.
So just to give I want to make sure I understand the mechanics of it. So you have Road B is coming at 10%, and so cars are going up at 10%, down percent in the other direction.
That's correct.
Then you have this cul-de-sac, small cul-de-sac, which is C, and it opens onto that street, and it's relatively flat coming into that street, but the cars coming up and down a hill, essentially.
Yeah, but you're correct. It's a 4%.
Okay.
Actually, looking at the profile for C, it's 4% along the entire length of that.
Thank you.
Okay, so the design, and we did discuss this with the DPW, that the through streets or the major would be considered, B would be considered major to this, would be at the grade that it is designed. The minor road coming in would have to be at no greater than 4% for 100 feet away from that intersection. And it is controlled, stopped, C is, at that intersection.
So just to clarify, that's the DPW's opinion on this, right?
We did discuss that with them, I believe, in the recommendations that came out of the preliminary plan, yes.
Ms. Brestrup?
The board might want to ask the DPW for something in writing about that. In other words, I have not seen anything in writing that the DPW agrees with this slope configuration. So
I see.
perhaps the board would like to have something like that confirmed in writing.
All right, yeah, because I mean, the bylaw just says within 100 feet of an intersection, it has to be 4 degrees. It doesn't say anything about the stop controlled or anything like that. That's certainly an interpretation. Okay, would you like to?
This is typically what I've noticed in my design throughout my career, yes.
Okay, thank you. So, any more on Road B? Any more slopes of, that was it for Road B?
I think I showed you the.
So that was
the
everything.
sections that the planning staff had pointed out in their report.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All
I
right.
didn't show you Road D as you go down. I can show you Road D, I'm sorry. There's a section of Road D. Road D comes off of Henry Street. Road D, okay, Henry Street. So you get a section in here of 10% right here. And then you have I think that is the only section that was identified, 325 to 565, which is in that section right there.
And that looks like it's on the approach down to Henry Street.
Yeah, you'll see that Henry Street would be the major street here, and we come off of, Road D comes off of that at 4% for a minimum of 100 feet.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you very much.
you're welcome.
All right, Ms. Ford, I believe you wanted to lead us off with a discussion about the use.
Well, I'm not quite sure. It's mostly questions, and I'm not quite sure the best way to approach this. It has been suggested that we can, as a board, request further clarification or case study from our town council on this issue, and I'm inclined to ask for that sooner than later in this process. Personally, I think this is a wonderful cluster plan. I think for typical residential, that it could potentially work in this site, given a more family-oriented, typical residential context, but it's just not that. And so I think it merits us discussing just the fact that it is all students that are 18 to 21, 22 years old without a lot of supervision, that it's a very different, very concentrated, very specific kind of use that, that even our looking at these roads and how cars will be moving and being parked and, how the site will actually be accessed and used needs to be considered differently. So, I think the discussion begins here, and maybe we do need to look at, is this should this be in an RF zone? Does this use actually, can we say that it belongs here or that it does not belong here, given what's proposed? So that's my initiation of the discussion.
All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Ford. It's a big subject, and it's hard to really know how to lead into it. So I'll start by just saying that we have two of our zoning districts at issue here. The first being RO, which is outlying residence. And I'm just going to quote from the bylaw. The purpose of the RO district is to provide for lower density residential areas. In general, the RO district is intended to be a transitional area between the low density residence RLD district and the medium density RN district. So then RN is the other one that we're dealing with here, which is a smaller amount of the area. And the purpose of the RN district is to provide for residential areas of medium densities. In general, the RN district is appropriate for lands adjacent to higher density residential districts, near arterial or primary residential streets, or in areas transitional between lower density districts and other districts. And you also mentioned fraternity, RF, fraternity residence. The purpose of the RF district is to provide for residential areas dedicated to the specific residential requirements of fraternities, sororities, and similar residential facilities associated with educational institutions. To this end, uses other than sororities, fraternities, and the like are restricted in this district. So what we have here is a development that's proposed to house, by design, it's designed to house students. The residences themselves are designed specifically for the needs of students in mind. We have something called an amenity area, which I intend to ask for elaboration on, that's proposed to provide some amenities specifically for students. And the applicant proposes to market and manage this property specifically for the student population. We need to keep in mind that it's a significant distance from the university. It's not right next to it. It's certainly not in the RF district. And so I think it is very appropriate to discuss the use. There's something else that needs to be said, I think, which is that there is a lawsuit underway to determine this very question that's been brought by some residents against the developer, I believe, in land court to try and determine the interpretation of that provision of our bylaw and to whether this is in fact permissible use in this zone. To my knowledge, there haven't been any rulings by that court at this time, and I have no idea what the status of that litigation is. And also, I don't know if our town council has rendered an opinion on that question. He is not. My understanding was that the use was to be discussed in the site plan review section of our review. Ms. Brestrom.
Staff has had a discussion with town council about that, and initially town council felt that it would be appropriate to discuss the use during review of the site plan review application, but you don't have the site plan review application before you, and at the time that town council made that recommendation, we thought that the two applications would be coming together, and they're not. One is lagging the other one. So we asked him specifically if it would be appropriate for you to discuss the use during your review of the definitive subdivision plan, and he said yes, because this is a residential subdivision plan that you're reviewing, and so you need to figure out, does it fit in with the zoning that's allowed for a residential subdivision plan like this in this particular zoning district. That's a discussion that would be appropriate for you to have.
I think so. I'll just ask Amherst Media if you could turn down the volume on the room speakers slightly. We might have less feedback, and everyone will still be able to hear. I'm going to just read briefly from the rules and regulations of our subdivision rules here. And the powers of the planning board under these regulations shall be exercised with due regard for the provision of adequate access to all the lots in a subdivision by ways that will be safe and convenient for travel, for minimizing congestion in such ways and in the public ways, for reducing danger to life and limb in the operation of motor vehicles, for securing safety in the case of fire, flood, panic, and other emergencies, for ensuring compliance with applicable zoning bylaws. And it goes on to say some other things which are also very important. But I'm not going to read them all, but it does say that we can determine compliance with the zoning bylaws. So this certainly, I agree with Ms. Brestrup, this is within the scope. You know, Mr. Tucker, did you have some input?
I simply wanted to recommend, aside from the feedback, that the board start to frame the questions that it wants town council and/or staff to investigate to help you frame this discussion as you go forward, rather than trying to resolve it all now. It's actually a very complex question that involves, since there is no use category designed for this in the bylaw, you have to find something among the categories that are there, and depending on which decision you make, it may complicate other things. So it would be helpful for you to frame what it is that you need to know so the town council and staff can provide you with that information as you go forward and consider making a decision about this.
All right, well, I have to say that doesn't seem too difficult. The town's not a party to this litigation, correct?
They are.
They are a party to
Yes.
this litigation. So is our town council involved as litigation counsel on that matter?
Yes.
Then they doubtless already have briefs from both sides on this, on the question to be resolved in this. I don't think that the board needs to try and refine that legal issue here at this hearing tonight. It's really, is this use permitted in this zone? I mean, it's real simple.
I believe that town council's participation in this to this point, although I am not familiar with all of it, has been focused on the question of whether or not bringing the suit was previous. That is to say, in a sense, the suit was challenging a decision about what the use is that the town had not yet made. And so they were trying to argue with the land court that, wait a minute, there's nothing to argue about here yet. So in some ways, what the board will be doing is resolving a point in that discussion to which everything else will respond.
So
Mr. Schreiber.
we've been through this before, so we had to make a determination at Olympia Drive whether or not that fit the definition of social dormitory. There have been times that we've had to define whether or not something's converted dwelling or duplex. So I see this as very much a part of our role, is to, the 9 of us to, figure out which of the use categories we think it most appropriately fits.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Reedy.
Thank you. So as far as the litigation goes, it's in the summary judgment phase. Each of the parties has submitted a motion for summary judgment and memorandum in support thereof. I did receive the towns today, and there is a portion in there about the use, and it's considered a residential use. I'll leave the rest of it for town council to inform the board on, but they have, in that lawsuit, rendered an opinion on behalf of the town. I think the board just needs to be careful about distinguishing between use and occupancy. There is a use category, with all due respect to Mr. Tucker, and it's single and two-family dwellings, residential use. And I think that the town makes a point to suggest that if in the future this was sold, it could potentially be, if it's sold as individual lots, just a residential, single-family home in one area, two-family home in another area. So I think the town is considering the fact that we're not limiting it, as we can't, to students. Yes, it's marketed towards students, but if the chairman would like to live there, if anybody in the public would like to live there, there is nothing preventing.
Sign me up.
There is nothing preventing anyone from living there, and that's part of the use. It's a residential use, and I think what we're doing is trying to categorize it broadly. There will be an opportunity at site plan review to have these discussions. We'll have management plans, leases. We'll have covenants, conditions, and
quiet,
restrictions,
please, in the back.
homeowners associations. and I don't want to continue to say at site plan review, at site plan review. If you perceive it as running, we can't run forever. There's going to be a time where all of this stuff is germane. I just don't think at this point it is. I guess I would ask the board how they would make a change to the design based on occupancy, an occupancy that may be temporary. It could be for years or a period of time when there are families there. I just don't know if we can get to that level of detail at this time. But to come back, it is in the summary judgment phase, and I know that the town council has rendered an opinion.
Thank you very much for your update on that. We really appreciate it. I think that a lot of people in the room were wondering what the status of that is. Ms. Ford?
Yeah, the only thing I can think of at this point, given the discussion that we're having tonight, it might have to do about parking and the number of cars that are proposed for the site here, because I think that if this was a more typical subdivision, there would not be over 700 cars or however many there are being proposed for this project, and the amount of paving and curb cuts and parking where it's, the way it's being proposed, it just wouldn't look like that at all. So if we were gonna discuss anything, that would be the thing I would focus on at this point in time. Other than that, I think I agree. But it's a big point. It's a big piece of the review of where we are right now, so.
Mr. Schreiber?
So there's all kinds of nuances for residential use in the zoning code. So it's not just straightforward single-family house duplex. There's converted dwellings, there's fraternities, there's sororities, there's social dormitories. There's, so it's not just, you know, a house is a house, because a house could be a fraternity, in which case it's regulated and zoned differently. So with all due respect, I think that who's in the houses plays into very much as to how, you know, basically what zoning category this might fit into. And actually the question from the consultant was, does this fit into boarding house or
Lodging house, yeah.
Boarding and lodging house, yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Tucker?
Those are the kinds of questions that can help us frame the discussion for your continuation of this hearing. Again, I think that, as Mr. Schreiber said, any point in this moves a whole bunch of other things. So I would recommend not trying to stop the discussion. I just want to point out that that's exactly the kind of information that we need.
So if I could just please ask that people be respectful of the person who's speaking. It's making it very difficult for us to concentrate and hear with all the chatter at the back of the room. I would really appreciate it if you could keep it down, please. We will get to public comment period. Tonight we will have some comment. Mr. Hirsch has asked to speak, and we're going to hear from him and probably some others. So please, I'll try and give as many people a chance to speak as I can, but it won't all be tonight. And I really would appreciate if we could just hear, you know, if we could be able to hear what's being said, it would be very helpful. Thank you. So, Mr. Schreiber, you suggested that, you know, we should try and, you know, that it's well within our scope for us to make this determination.
I think so. I think that's our obligation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm inclined to agree with you. To interpret the zoning bylaw is our job. And in fact, if whatever our decision on this were appealed, you know, the standard of review would be whether we, you know, had a reasonable basis for making our decision on that issue. And it would only be overturned if we abused our discretion as a board to interpret the bylaw, all right? So it's definitely within the scope of what we can do to determine whether this is a permissible use within the zone. And whether we want to do this now, or whether we want to wait and get an opinion for town council, or whether we want to do it later in the public hearing process, is really an open question. I mean, to just put it right there on the table, if we were to vote now that this is an impermissible use, we all go home, right? That's the end of the process until it's appealed, right? Am I right? Okay, so there it is. And so if somebody, you know, wants to discuss this more right now before we go into more detail and spend more time on going through the details of these plans, then let's do that. But if we're going to look at the project as a whole before we determine what it is, you know, then, you know, and maybe that makes more sense to me, we can do that too. Mr. Rosnoy.
It seems to me that the information Ms. Brestrup has included in the preliminary development application report that she put together in talking with town legal counsel is pretty much the extent of what town legal counsel can do for us at this point until the existing lawsuit is resolved. And so I agree with Mr. Schreiber that it's our role to take the guidance from town legal counsel and to just go with it. I think he's pointed out some salient points that need to be addressed. The fact that fair housing regulations pretty much bar the manager from keeping anyone from renting the units. Their marketing may be a different aspect of the project, but to the extent that town legal counsel has provided Ms. Brestrup with some guidance and she's passed it on to us, I think that it's fair enough to proceed. Regarding Mr. Tucker's point about framing issues to be addressed, I think it's fair for us to ask our consultant, Fuss & O'Neill, to identify which of the issues in his report where he has questions, which of those issues are for us to address, or which, for example, he might say, this particular issue seems to be based on some legal questions and the board should request an opinion from town council. There are a number of areas in our consultant's report that raise questions, and they're valid questions, they're good questions. The question I have is, who's to answer those questions? And I'd like to see our consultant moving forward as we go forward, take those questions and say, this one is for the planning board to resolve, this one is for legal counsel to resolve, etc. Or this one is for staff to work up the data on.
So let's take your concept and focus it in on the issues that bear directly on whether this is a social dormitory. I'm going to use shorthand, right? So it's the, let's see. I think that if I'm going to go through some of the letters that we've received on this, I believe that some of the aspects that people have pointed to that would make this a social dormitory are the internal design of the units themselves. First of all, is starting from the inside. You have 4 bedrooms per unit. Each bedroom has its own bathroom, and they have a kitchen and a living room. They have space for 1 parking space per bedroom, right? Just about, or slightly more than 1 space per bedroom. What else is there besides that? The management scheme we have, and the advertising. And I'll call on.
And the accessory building that will house a variety of common amenities, yes.
The amenities, okay, which we don't know about yet.
Right, but
That would be that's really a site plan issue, but I think we can address it in the subdivision too. What is that space? Mr. Stutzman?
I'm not sure I would agree we can address it in the sense that we don't have the specifics on it. So I feel if we're going to look at, for instance, at the amenity lot and make some sort of judgment on the overall use, which is another issue I'll get to in a second, it might be premature to do that since we don't have that information. And the larger issue I see is that what is it we're discussing here? Are we talking about the entire group of parcels, or are we talking about the use on one given parcel? For instance, if this was one parcel, I might be inclined to see this as more of a collective arrangement. And are we making a use decision for all at once or one at a time? Because I would see a very different situation if we had one property here.
I think we're reviewing this as a cluster subdivision, which is an entire, it's a whole. It's not, well, I don't know.
I agree with you, Ms. Ford. Mr. Tucker?
Cluster development is a development method as opposed to a land use. A land use is what's happening within, if you look through the bylaw for not only cluster development where it does the same thing, but for planned unit residential development, at the beginning of each section there's a listing of the range of uses that are ordinarily expected to be, or in some cases are regulated to be allowed in those development methods. But those two things are distinct. You have land uses, which are regulated in the use chart, and you have development methods, which is how you aggregate it on the land.
Mr. Stutzman?
So I guess what I'm then saying is that if we were to find, the scope that we've defined so far is the entirety of the proposal, then we are in essence finding that each property is a dormitory. And that's my concern.
Oh, the cluster.
I would think the use is to be looked at as a whole,
Yeah.
and not lot by lot. I really disagree with that perspective, I have to say. I don't. It's just.
So for instance, is it not the case that the amenity lots are proposed to be a different use category than the residential lots?
Or they could be seen, that could certainly be one way of looking at it, I agree. It could also be seen as that they're part of the, they're a common space dedicated to all the lots, much like in a condominium area or apartment building, you might have a swimming pool that's part of the overall use of an apartment complex, right? And you wouldn't say, well, we're gonna examine whether although, there has been, I see your point now, because there have been points made by, members of the public that certain uses that have been allowed in other retreats in other parts of the country would not be allowed in the RO zone. For instance, a bowling alley, right? Is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
I suppose to broaden the context a little, I wonder if staff perhaps has any examples of a past permitting situation. Clearly, we don't have any close analogies to this, but where multiple parcels were involved and the use of multiple parcels was classified in a different way than the individuals, or the adjacent use had an impact on the interpretation of one given parcel.
Ms. Brestrup?
We do have examples of that in PURD's planned unit residential developments where property is divided into lots, but the whole development is considered at the same time. It used to be considered by, I think it still is considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals, actually, for development in a PURD. But that's, an overall project that is divided into lots.
So is that like the co-housing off of Pulpit Hill Road, where there's a number of units and then you have a common building and common space, common parking lots? Was that considered by the Board of Appeals as a whole, or were the individual uses considered separately? Mr. Tucker?
It was considered by the board as a whole as a development method. The uses within that development method were whatever they were in terms of the residential uses. There were explicitly allowed under the PORD section uses that were shared, whether they were gathering space, kitchens, workshops, whatever you find in an intentional community like that. We do not, that I'm aware of, have a precedent for having a single large development composed of multiple properties where the whole thing is considered one use. I suppose you could have something like that. It would be along the lines of a commercial use, someone who was developing a singular kind of business with all of the buildings on all of the individual parcels being part of that singular business, and permit it that way. But again, there's a distinction between the development method, standard subdivision being allowed by right and other uses being allowed by different kinds of regulation, and the uses that occupy this. One of the concerns about the potential complication in this, and Mr. Stutzman started to talk about it, if, for instance, a determination was made that a building as described, with 4 bedrooms, each with its own bathroom, and a shared kitchen and living room space, was, because it was occupied by students or planned to be occupied students or marketed principally to students, that was a dormitory. Consider the fact that Amherst is a one-industry town, and that you have single-family homes, duplexes, converted dwellings, small apartment complexes all over this community that are occupied by academic residents only. In some cases, they are only ever occupied by those folks. In other cases, they change year to year. If you establish the precedent of saying this is a dormitory, it's all dormitories. This is one of the complications that we can get into here.
So that's.
You'll have your chance.
So, yeah,
I'm
please.
I'm not arguing for or against this.
Yep.
What I'm saying is there are ripples in any of this. What we would like the opportunity to do is present you with a framework to consider those in after consultation with town council based on questions you have.
So I think you're asking us to hold off on a decision on this, is what you're saying.
Yes.
So let me just address Mr. Stutzman's point once more in terms of section 4.3 of the zoning bylaw, which says, and this is the cluster subdivision development method. Section 4.31 says, purpose. It is intended that a cluster development be developed as an entity by a landowner or association of adjacent landowners in which an alternative pattern of development may be permitted. And then it proceeds to list the following aspects that it should have: economical and efficient street, utility, and public facility installation, construction, and maintenance; efficient allocation, distribution, and maintenance of common open space; land use harmonious with the natural features; compatibility with the character of the surrounding residential areas; efficient use of land to increase the options for affordable housing; housing development which allows for integration of a variety of housing types within one project; and protection of natural resources, including but not limited to aquifers, wetlands, and farmland. And then it says use and dimensional standards include a one-family detached dwelling, a zero lot line single-family dwelling, a two-family detached dwelling, duplex, or dwellings, or other lawful accessory building may be constructed on certain lots in a cluster development, although such lots have less area frontage and/or rear side yard dimensions than normally required. So that's sort of the lead-in to the cluster development section. It doesn't, to me, it's not clear that amenities are included in that use category. I don't know where that leaves us, except that it does say that it should be developed as an entity. I'm, for one, am prepared to wait until next week and see if town council come up with any guidance for us. And, maybe somebody can review the pleadings and see where both sides have argued this issue.
So,
Ms. Ford.
so my only thought, I agree, but my thought is that moving forward through the rest of these, the items that have been outlined for us here, is that we keep in mind, like the parking, what else comes up that is different and that makes this use distinctly, that it flavors the how these roads and how the access and, what the impact is on the site, how it might color it a little bit differently. That would be my recommendation at this point.
Mr. Schreiber?
Yeah, so put another way, I think we would look at the access road to a high school parking lot differently than we would look at the access road to a not high school parking lot. Just, taking, where's that feedback come?
The speakers in the room are too loud,
Yeah.
and it's causing feedback.
But I guess the point is that the lens I'm looking at this through is 18 to 22-year-olds.
Each with their own car.
Each with their own car. So the, the steepness of roads, basically kind of the waivers that are being asked for, which one sees as, which I see as safety issues, that I would tend to kind of look at, maybe in the same way that I would look at a project that's being marketed to the elderly. I would look at that differently than one that was truly a conventional subdivision.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiber. I'm not sure how much further we can go with this today unless someone has something new to add. I agree with you that we have to look at it in the context of what's the use that's proposed. I mean, is it, well, you said it. I don't hear anybody making a motion to determine this tonight, so I would propose that we move on to the next section. Would that be all right? And also, I want to just make clear that at some point, probably at 9:15, I'm going to stop and take public comment because I really want to get some in tonight. I think that's very important to our process. So, Mr. Stutzman, did you
I
have?
was just going to comment on the feedback situation. It may be that they're turning the mic pickup up, so if people could move closer to the mics, they can then turn the volume down.
Thank you. I'm no audiovisual expert, but
Just a guess.
I think you may be right. Okay. We'll give it a try. So we were talking about the roadways, and there's a list of waivers on page 5 of the development application report. I guess we'll start, we can just go through it about the cul-de-sacs. There is a cul-de-sac that exceeds 800 feet in length, that's Road B. It's really a loop rather than a cul-de-sac. And I actually wouldn't consider it a cul-de-sac, but staff is considering it one. I guess if it were considered a cul-de-sac, we'd have to grant a waiver. It's not considered a cul-de-sac, we don't have to grant the waiver. Any feelings one way or the other on that? Mr. Rosner?
Mr. Chair, could we have the applicant address this? I believe in Amherst Media, could you turn the microphone volume down, please, so we get less feedback? Thank you. I think in your presentation you said there were no roadways in excess of 800 attaching to a cul-de-sac. And obviously we have this discrepancy between your view and staff's view. Could you address this?
Yes, I will. I'm trying to get back to the overall general plan here, just so that we can see the overall plan. I think will help in describing our opinion on this one issue. Sorry about that. It's taking some time.
Did you want to get back to your PowerPoint presentation? Is that what you're looking for?
I was looking for just an overall plan, which I know we have on the cover sheet here.
I think you need to give each page a little minute to load there.
Maybe we could go back to.
Here it comes.
So I think we're all familiar with the layout of that northern loop road. There it is.
Oh, sorry. At the top here and all. Okay. So Road B. Is this road here. It is a loop road, and you recall, Ms. Brestrup did say the intersection station to Road C, which is this small cul-de-sac, was 7 plus 86, something like that. So we would, it's our opinion that the actual, if there were considered a cul-de-sac portion of Road B, would be from 786 to the beginning at the intersection of Road A. If you come up to the cul-de-sac, we have designed in this cluster subdivision an emergency access that goes through the municipal lot here where the future reservoir will be, along through this open space lot to this residential lot, ties into the parking and gets you back to the loop road. So overall, this entire area here, this circulation loops on itself. The only area that is strictly one-way in would be about 700 and some odd distance, but not over 800. That's our opinion. That's why we're not over an 800-foot cul-de-sac length. The true cul-de-sac is, we really don't have here. It's really from there to the intersection of Road C, and then this cul-de-sac here, which is E, I believe.
Thank you. Ms. Brestrup.
I may be miss. Jeez. If I get really close, is that better? Okay, that's good. The way I read the plans, the intersection of Road B with the loop is about 1,100 plus 00, station 1,100, so I think it's actually 1,100 feet long. So I'm just pointing that out.
From the point, I'm sorry, could
From
you?
the point where Road B intersects with Road A, and the point where it intersects with the loop, right
Yeah.
there. Yeah, I think that's
so that-
1,100 feet.
So-
So it's over 800 feet, and then you have the loop. So I'm pointing that out to you. It is true that they have two emergency access roads. One goes to Road A, and the other one goes to the cul-de-sac Road C. So you may find that mitigates the length of this, what I consider to be functionally the same as a cul-de-sac. It's
So-
not exactly the same as a cul-de-sac, but I think it functions like a cul-de-sac.
So the risk that this rule is designed to mitigate, the 800-foot rule, is that if there's a blockage in the main road, that there wouldn't be access. So if on that, say in that 10% grade stretch next to Road D, that there's a car wedged or a PVPA bus wedged sideways in that intersection, right? Then there's no way for anybody to get up to any of those houses in that loop. So it's functionally the same as a cul-de-sac. Is that right?
That's correct, except that they have provided two emergency access drives, one coming from the loop down to Road C,
Yeah.
and one coming from the loop down to Road A. So those are, as I understand it, access drives that would be around 16 feet wide, that would be gated at both ends and would be available for police and fire to use if there were a blockage in that 1,100-foot length of road.
So, all right, so I understand that and I see how it alleviates the safety problem, but what I don't understand is how you can have a 16-foot road running through what's supposed to be open space.
No, we understand.
I mean, is it still open space if it's got a road going through it?
Can I clarify something?
I mean,
Mr. Chairman?
yes, please, go ahead.
This one over here is actually a utility easement, and we just received comments from the DPW that they are requiring an all-excess weather road over that. We have a cross-country sewer here. So it'd be up to us in reviewing those comments, whether we continue with that type of an arrangement, or do we change it up somehow and not provide that. We're only at this point, and our submittal is this section here is our emergency access. So we go here, 786, I believe, and then it loops.
Question?
Mr. Rosnoy.
These emergency roadways trap rock gravel, or?
They're all excess weather roads, which, in this case, we have it gated on both ends. We have it gated at the reservoir because I believe the DPW asked for security at the reservoir, and this is gated after the parking lot of that unit. And this will be, it'll be gravel, it's probably going to be 12 inches of bank run gravel with 6 inches of processed gravel on top. So it'll handle, and be strong enough to handle any of the emergency vehicles that traverse over that. Our proposal is not to pave that.
The same for the easement road?
That's a new requirement that came up in review from the DPW. We haven't discussed it, but I would assume that it'd be something of that nature, whether it has to be 16 feet wide. We haven't talked over the particulars with the DPW on that at this point. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Thank you. By the way, Amherst Media, the sound is 100% better. Whatever you did is working great. Mr. Stutzman.
So it would help me on this particular topic of the roadways. We have, I think, 5 issues where there's waivers required or requested, laid out in staff's excellent development report on page 5, under section A. And I recall our consultant, Mr. Severia, had an opinion on at least the issue of the 4% grade exceeding, or the maximum grade exceeding 4% within 100 feet of an intersection, which I recall he said did not seem acceptable to him. I was wondering if he had an opinion on the other items where waivers are required or requested.
Mr. Severia, thank you.
I guess I would like to limit my opinions to the issues or the waivers that are requested that really have to do with the roadways themselves. As far as things like frontage requirements, that's really a land use decision, I believe. Setbacks, those kinds of things. I think the maximum 8% grade is not, it's not unheard of. A lot of towns have maximum grades in excess of 8%, 10 or 12%, especially in kind of hillier towns where it's very difficult to develop any land without such kind of grades on roadways. I think specifically our concern about that is through intersections. We'd really like to see that reduced through intersections. The minimum horizontal curves, I'm not familiar enough with the road layout to know exactly how much of a waiver they're requesting. So I think I would reserve an opinion on that until we've had a chance to review the plans a little more closely. The cul-de-sac length, and I think it's important to, I think that Mr. Chairman described it, the purpose of the cul-de-sac length restriction very accurately, in that the length itself is not an arbitrary thing. It's related to the number of residential units that you're going to have served by a single point of access. And of course, if we had lots with 200-foot frontage, you know, on 800 feet, you might not have that many lots, and so you might actually, you know, consider waiving that quite often. But I think the provision of the emergency access roads really mitigates against any concern of that waiver, as long as those roads are maintained, especially in the winter, so that they are passable by emergency vehicles without delay. And I would also like to hear the opinion of your emergency service providers on whether they were satisfied with that arrangement. So I think that's all the opinions I'm prepared to to give on those issues.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiber.
So I guess I have a dumb question, but if the emergency access road were just a road, then this problem wouldn't even be discussed. In other words, if the dotted line became a black line, just saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Is
So in
that-
other words, there's a solution to the problem, which is to make the emergency access roads. And then we don't have to debate whether or not it's a 780 feet or 1,100 feet.
Ms. Brestrup?
There will be a significant amount of disturbance if you make them roads rather than access roads, because access roads are going to be something that don't have curbs, they don't have sidewalks, they're, you know, not as wide, they may not be graded the same as a regular road, they wouldn't be held to the same steepness requirements, so there would be, you know, a difference. One concern that I have, if you would let me go on a little bit, is that I do know that there are emergency access roads in other developments in Amherst that are not maintained, and vegetation grows into them, and they get covered with glass because they're a place where people go and sort of hide and drink and break bottles and all of that sort of thing, and we get complaints about it. So the issue of maintaining these roads is very important, the access roads.
Thank you for that interesting observation. Mr. Schreiber?
So if I may, so there's the emergency issue, but then there's a connectivity issue. So I think that, you know, cul-de-sacs are kind of lousy for neighborhood connectivity. So or, you know, frankly, loop roads are the same. So but the more kind of options people have within a community, the better. Like blocks are actually a really good kind of an urban design strategy. So my inclination would be to hold the line on cul-de-sacs and encourage the applicants to look at other ways of designing the roads so that there's better connectivity and that this cul-de-sac issue is not even on the table.
So to do that, it would essentially require a finding that this loop road, as far as Private Street B, as shown on the plan, is a cul-de-sac, and to decline to grant the waiver, right?
Yeah.
That's, okay.
That would be my inclination.
All right, thank you, Mr. Schreiber. Ms. Anderson?
Just thinking about what you just said, the design, a change in design, more block-like, might create more, you know, connectivity. Given the proposed use and marketing of this, maybe we don't want to promote connectivity.
Right.
As we would in a more of a traditional family-occupied, single-family or
Looking for a
duplex.
more monastic.
Just saying.
A retreat, right? A monastic retreat. That's why they call it the retreat.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiber. And Ms. Anderson. You know, it is it's a tricky situation to try and figure out what's happening with this. You know, my concern too about this, you know, if we're talking about putting a road through this area here, that, you know, one of the purposes of the cluster development is to provide, what is it? I closed it already. Something about contiguous areas, large contiguous areas of open space, I believe. So that area there is actually one of the larger areas on the parcel it might be the largest area on the parcel that you could actually call open space. And putting a road through it, I'm not even sure if it's possible, because I think the applicant might have done it if it was possible. So I don't know what the terrain is through that area, whether there's wetlands, whether there's other steep slopes that would prevent putting an actual road there. I just don't know. Yes, sir. But before I get to you, I just want to say that I do think that, you know, if we're looking to preserve areas of open space, that putting a road through that area would be counter to that particular principle.
Can I speak? Yes, I wanted to just mention that we did take your comments seriously from the preliminary plan. The connectivity in our interpretation of those recommendations was not for vehicle traffic, but more for pedestrian traffic. So you will see that from the cul-de-sac here, you'll see that we have pedestrian access and open space passive area here with a connectivity to the road here. We also have a trail that connects from this cul-de-sac back over to the street. We have where this utility easement will give you walking connectivity back to there. You have connectivity to the trail. This access easement here is also for bike or pedestrian access. So we did what we thought the board was asking us to do. We have this trail connection down here to get you to Henry Street, close to Pine Street to get you to Cushman. It wasn't vehicle type of connectivity that we thought you were looking for, but more pedestrian and bike related. This being a cluster, we are trying to maintain those wildlife corridors. We are trying to maximize the amount of open space that we can dedicate to the town. So you'll see that we've placed the roads in a most efficient fashion to be able to capture the upland areas, and to provide another road here is not efficient, and it doesn't make the subdivision or this cluster work very well. It is important to have that access for an emergency standpoint, but not for efficiency. We try to double load the streets as best we can. We're trying to reduce the amount of grading and the amount of development area. That's why this cluster works so well, and provide as much open space as possible. So I just wanted to state that there is the connectivity from the cul-de-sacs between the roads, but it's more pedestrian related, not vehicular related. That was our intention, or our interpretation from the recommendations from the preliminary plan. I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you very much for the explanation. Yep. All right. So there's a lot of detail here. We're obviously not going to get a chance to go through the entire report tonight. I want to ask one question before we get. No, I'm not going to go there. Anything more on the roads for now? I mean, we had, yes, Mr. Rosnoy.
Yeah, if I could make a request of the applicant, I believe, or if not, maybe our consultants. Somewhere, I believe in the preliminary plan, I saw a narrative that related the grades in excess of 8% or 10%, to different areas in the town.
Yeah, yeah.
And that would help us, I believe, to visualize. I have a difficult even seeing your graph, being able to visualize what a 10% grade means. For example, the slope on Strong Street going into Northeast Street, or other places in town. Looks like maybe Ms. Brestrup has an answer to this.
Ms. Brestrup.
I believe that list is on the town website, and it's among the documents that were prepared for the preliminary subdivision plan. But I will pull it off for your next meeting. I'll send it to you.
Thanks,
But
that
if
would
you
help.
wanted to look at it tonight, you could just go on the website.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brestrup.
That's a good idea.
All right, so I'm going to stop our discussion now and go ahead and take some public comment, as I promised. I believe Mr. Hirsch had some prepared remarks. Did you need any preparatory time?
No preparatory time, but I have a data stick.
Can you assist him with that, or is that?
Yes, maybe Mr. Stutzman could advise me. We have 2 ports for such devices, and one of the ports is supporting the applicant. Can we use both ports and stick another one of these things in, and it would, both of them would work? Okay. I knew you would know.
It's a demographic. Yes, the youngest person on the.
Right.
The rest of us are data sticks,
Right. Port?
wine.
That's like a disc, right?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
a, yeah.
Kingston. Yeah. Hopefully. Planning board. Okay. Well, I'm Jack Hirsch. I live at 400 Flat Hills Road, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk. I must say I'm a little surprised. You stole a little of my thunder, Mr. Weber, when you read about the cluster development, because that's essentially one thing that I really wanted to emphasize. Section 4.3 of the zoning bylaw, which governs cluster development, and gives 4.31, which we can all read, gives the purpose for granting the cluster development. It's intended that a cluster development be developed as an entity by a landowner in well, I won't read it. You've already read it to the audience. But it
Sorry
does,
about that.
Well, it happens. It'll just be a shorter introduction. But it does mention that there are 7 reasons for granting the cluster subdivision application, and I'd like to go through those 7 reasons and see if they hold true in this case. The first one is economic and efficient street, utility, and public facility installation, construction, and maintenance. I suppose that economy and efficiency are in the eye of the beholder, but this does not seem to me to be an economical undertaking at all. If you look at their bonding purposes, there was over $6 million just for rock work, and a total of almost 8.7 million for clearing, grubbing, and grading, including that rock work. So I don't think that this plot of land makes for an efficient use or economic use for a cluster subdivision. I think that the second point, efficient allocation, distribution of maintenance of common open space, is a second consideration, and that's something that we've been talking about when we saw their map. There are some small areas of animal corridors and things like that, but it's yet to be seen with our consultants, your consultants' comments, whether those easements and things will actually allow use for those open spaces. I also haven't heard anything about whether the general public will have access, and that'll be the town of Amherst land. So certainly I think the general public should have access to those things. So that's a second point, which is questionable. The third one, land harmonious with the natural features. You know, that's a joke. I mean, with all of the cost of construction in excavation and blasting, they still have to ask for waivers to get to 8% road grade. I mean, clearly this is not harmonious with the land and natural features. Compatibility with the character of the surrounding residential areas. I appreciated Mr. Wonseski showing some pictures of streetscapes of the retreats. I challenge all of you to drive around the Cushman area and find anything that looks anything like those. That is just not at all in the character of the neighborhood. Those of us that live in this neighborhood made an intentional choice to live in an RO zone. Many people did it for different reasons, but you know, the common reason was we wanted a lower density experience for our lives. And we're looking to the planning board to protect us in that regard. This was a choice we made. Other people made other choices. We don't disrespect other people for their choices, but please help us maintain our choices. Efficient use of land to increase the options for affordable housing. Well, that's off the table. Housing development, which allows for integration of a variety types of housing within one project. The Cushman area is on the National Historic Register, and if you look at the architecture of those homes, they're quaint and they're of a very unique style. If you drive around Flat Hills Road, those houses are generally, and Market Hill, those houses are generally set in areas that are very isolated and very different from the retreat. Those are a diverse architectural style. Flat Hills Road is also much more diverse in architecture, although the new houses have taken the neighborhood into consideration, and their architecture reflects old farmhouses and things like that that are in the neighborhood. I think that the retreat doesn't reflect that architecture at all. It's just not in the style of the neighborhood. and it doesn't provide a particularly interesting variety of architectural renderings. The last one on the list, protection of natural resources, including but not limited to aquifers, wetlands, and farmlands. Well, it had been farmed. It was timber farmed. It's been taken out of Chapter 61 for timber farming, so we're clearly not protecting farmland. It's hard to believe that this is protecting natural resources when it requires so much site work in order to So I would suggest that of the 7 reasons, there may be one at most that is a valid reason for creating a subdivision, a cluster subdivision. If 6 of the 7 don't exist, I think that you have to refuse their application. It just doesn't meet the standards that the zoning bylaw requires. So the next slide I'd like to go to brings up a document which I'm surprised hasn't been mentioned yet, and it's the master plan. I think this is a document that the planning board supports and has developed, and you're all probably much more familiar with it than I am. In section 3 of the master plan, it talks about, it was a process in which citizens gave their input as to what was important for them, and it brought up a number of objectives for land use which citizens felt were valid. And what I've done is the emphasis, the underlining is my own, but these are quotes directly from the objectives that are in the master plan. The first one is preferentially direct future development to existing built-up areas. Well, the built-up areas doesn't mean literally elevated. It means the ones around town which have been developed already. So I think you can see that, you know, we're not directing development here to a built-up area. The second one is create a vital downtown and village center areas of mixed use, including retail, commercial, and residential elements that are walkable, attractive, and efficient. Well, Cushman has no commercial district whatsoever. There is one store which, as you all know, operates by an exemption that's granted every year, I believe, so that they can operate. So this is not something that's creating a vital downtown district. This is something that's plunked away in the center of a residential outlying district. The third objective, preserve key undeveloped lands. Amherst Community places a high value on its unique landscapes and natural resources. We maintain that this is a very unique piece of land. You've all walked on it and you saw how rugged it is. It's unique to Amherst. I certainly don't think that this development is going to preserve that. Rather, I think it's going to destroy it. So continuing on, there are 9 of these, so we won't have to go too long. The fourth one is protect key farmland and farming in Amherst. Well, again, I mentioned it was timber farming. It's no longer in timber farming, so I think that we're certainly not following that tenet of the master plan. The fifth land use objective, identify key locations for business development and adopt land use regulations that can help broaden the town's business tax base. I certainly agree that that's important, but this is not a business area, and I don't think that rental housing qualifies as the kind of business that we're talking about up there. We're much more interested in 12-month businesses that create economy all year around. We're not looking for 9-month rentals that create 9 months of business. Objective 6 is a guide to new housing growth so as to minimize impact on Amherst's open space and small-town rural character. Well, Cushman has been recognized in a number of different publications as a really unique rural small town within the larger town of Amherst. And I think that this development hardly enhances that at all. It doesn't minimize the impact on open space. I think rather it utilizes the open space for development which will destroy the open space. All right, and the last one is to honor the historic, cultural character and beauty of neighborhoods. Well, I think enough said. You'll hear from the Historic Commission, and this development is going to really change the face of Cushman and really detract from its historic significance and its beauty as a community. Objective number 10 is to utilize greenways and walkways to tie neighborhoods, public spaces, et cetera, together for Amherst residents to walk and bicycle and stuff. Having steeper roads and things is going to inhibit bicycling and walking. I mean, I don't think that this development is in any way intended to try and tie communities together. I think keeping the land undeveloped and allow it for public recreation, which has been used for years, would do much more to that. So I hope that I've convinced you that this development is really anathema to the master plan. I've also tried to convince you that it doesn't deserve a permit as a cluster subdivision. And what I would ask is that you reduce its size, maintain the letter of the zoning bylaw so that it is as similar as possible to the surrounding community. Maintain the 100-foot frontage, maintain the setbacks, maintain all of the safety for roads so that the people that live there can try to continue our lives as best we can. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hirsch. Nope. No. Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Hirsch? No. Okay. More public comment. Yes, in the second row.
I'm Ellen Pyle, 110 Bridge Street, and I submitted written comments to the board last week that were entirely and completely about the land use question. And I'm sorry that they were so long. I tried to alert you that you could read only the first 2 pages if you wanted to become intrigued by them. So my comments tonight are that I feel like possibly those written comments were completely off base because of some of the things you've been talking about. And I'm wondering if I could respectfully suggest some questions to ask Town Council about land use, because they are questions I asked in my comments, and now I think possibly they don't really have a good answer, the answer I hoped for. So I'm wondering if it would be feasible to ask Town Council if you are have a reasonable basis, as Mr. Weber talked about, in looking at how a retreat operates as an entity and not just as a use on each separate lot. I mean, to give a sense or give information to you about if you wanted to look at a retreat as an entity and not, 175 uses for 175 units, could you go about that, and how would you go about that? Because all of my remarks are really about how a retreat operates as an entity. And I realize that most of what I said is stuff that you will eventually see in the management plan and is not about the roadway structure and the things that are before you now. And I guess I feel like it's a strategy by Landmark to feed our town information piecemeal, so that even I may feel like I've invested a month and a half of my life in getting that intersection of the cul-de-sac, and the small road together in the right way. And I don't want to now say that the whole thing is illegal, but I think you're getting fed things in a piecemeal fashion. So I'm wondering if Town Council could offer us an opinion about whether information that was provided during the preliminary plan process could be used in August and September ahead of whatever you're going to hear. Because I feel like Landmark is talking even less about it being student housing than they did during the preliminary plan. And during the preliminary plan, I believe the current owner of the land provided you information about the retreat at State College. Landmark discussed its award-winning architecture, and there's a lot of information that isn't as it's completely engineering as it is today. So that's a second question. And a question I asked in my written comments was, can we look at the pattern of use as well as the superficial physical structure? I got that from listening to the zoning subcommittee here talk about the potential for an off-campus residential use article, that a pattern of use is a possible way to approach looking at how you define something and not just its physical structure. And I guess my fourth question would be, in Amherst, is just constructing buildings that are house-like enough to make the use a single-family dwelling? So that's some questions. And as a side comment, because I have been watching, I'm not a party to the lawsuit, I have been watching it on Mass Court, the website for the court system, and I wondered, because we've asked so often for Mr. Bard to render an opinion, and there's been silence, and we figured soon, now. So I wondered, why was he doing it just now, like Mr. Reedy talked about? And then the bulb that went off in my head is that Landmark filed a countersuit against the town as part of that. And I don't understand much about the purpose of the countersuit, but I'm wondering if Mr. Bard's response was really because that thing happened, and not that suddenly there was a reason to render an opinion. So I hope that that those kind of issues are important as we think about land use. I don't know which way you will go, but I think it's important for you to understand the scope of your authority as much as town council can advise you on that, and I hope he can. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Pyle. Ms. Brestrup.
I wanted to respond to one of Ms. Pyle's questions, which has to do with whether information that was presented during the preliminary plan process can be introduced at this time, and I think that the answer is yes. It's not up to staff to kind of look through all of that material and figure out what would be the most useful for you. If you remember things that you would like us to pull out, we'd be happy to do that. If members of the public are aware of material that was presented back then and would like to present that to you at this time, that is perfectly legitimate and fine. If staff were to do that, it's sort of, we can't take a position on a case. And so we would be pulling things out selectively. So I'm just telling you that if you want something from that file, or if the public wants something from that file, please let us know, and we will provide it to you during this public hearing process.
Thank you. Yeah, and I believe all those materials are still up on the town website.
Many of them are, yes.
Right. There was also a transcript prepared of the entire hearing, as I recall. Further public comment? Yeah, in the back. Yep, right there.
Ann Hollingworth, Henry Street. Can you hear me?
A little louder.
Pardon?
A little louder, please.
Ann Hollingworth, Henry Street.
There you go.
I want to ask your permission to address the historical issue, even though I know you were talking about dealing with that under site plan review, or maybe I read that in a letter.
My permission, you can
Okay,
talk about
good.
whatever you like.
All right. Landmark says that the historic factors for the retreat are irrelevant because there are no historical structures on the land and because the property is not within the Cushman Village National Historic District. We argue that A, the said land is itself historic, and B, there will be substantial detrimental impacts on the surrounding historic neighborhoods. How is the land historic? This land was part of what was called the Flat Hills Equivalent Land, and in 1740 was granted to residents of East Hadley, now Amherst, and I'm grossly oversimplifying here, to compensate for land lost in a boundary error. In other words, this land was an integral part of Amherst's history. Also, in 1860, the town built a bridle road, that's in quotes, through the woods so that the residents on Flat Hills Road could walk directly through the woods to church and school in the center of the village. What is now a logging road is truly an historic road. Now for the impacts on the surrounding historic neighborhoods. Landmark's proposed cookie-cutter architecture would be out of place next to the 18th and 19th century historic buildings around the retreat. Cushman Village is a National Historic District in part because of a labor practice called the Rhode Island system, used in New England paper mills in the 1800s. Paper manufacturers employed whole families in their mills, unlike the boarding houses that were used in places like Holyoke and Lowell. And they employed the whole families in their mills and bought single-family houses for them and then rented these houses out to the families that worked for them. Thus, 88% of the homes in Cushman are single-family houses. 60% of the houses in the retreat would be duplexes. Doesn't fit. Changes in the neighborhood would threaten the livelihood of the preschool house housed in the historic schoolhouse. I know that Nancy Farber has expressed concern. Parents are already worried about the blasting and talking about removing their kids from the school. And that's just the beginning. They've talked about the possibility of swearing profanity at the bus stop, which is only a few feet away from where the kids get in their cars when they come and go. The blasting during construction could harm the foundations of buildings that are 150 to 200 years old. My house is about 150 years old. I'm very concerned about that. Poor quality of life could cause homeowners to sell homes within the National Historic District to absentee landlords. The rural characteristic of the historic village would be destroyed. Trees on scenic historic roads would be cut down, and traffic for 640 residents would flow out onto these roads. The population of the village would multiply. There are currently 24 households with adults under 25 in Cushman. After the retreat, there would be close to 200 such households, actually 199, so I think I really can say close to 200, increasing almost by a factor of 10. We ask you to uphold the master plan goals and zoning bylaws that state that development should honor and preserve the historic character of neighborhoods. We also request that you use the preservation tool outlined in the Amherst Preservation Plan by giving the Historical Commission input in the approval process for the development, including an important role in the site plan review. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hollingworth. So I would like to start to address this, and maybe Mr. Tucker can help me, but I think that, involving the Historical Commission to try and analyze some of these issues or to help us with them is definitely within the scope of what the planning board can do. In fact, the site plan review permit process explicitly contemplates involving the Historical Commission under section 11.230 of the zoning bylaw. I'm plagiarizing blatantly from something Mr. Tucker wrote to me. And he also expressed the idea that that the appropriate time to involve the Historic Commission might even be before the site plan review is submitted, and that we could certainly make a request that they look at this. Am I accurately summarizing your comments, Mr. Tucker? I'm inclined to do that. I think that we need some expertise on this particular issue. I was a history major in college, but it doesn't make me an expert on Cushman. So presumably folks on the Historical Commission have experience with looking at different areas of town and their historic significance. I would personally like to invite their comment on this issue, if the board is amenable to that. All right. More public comment. Let's see, in the back there. Yep, you.
My name is Alton Acker. I live at 53 Henry Street. It was originally the Ashley Blacksmith Shop. I still pay a commercial rate on the grandfathered shop. I make musical instruments. I used to make period furniture, but I got doing instruments, and it's better at my age. You have to be in really good shape to do that every day. About a year and a half ago, Landmark welcomed themselves to us coming to build student housing. It's been softened a lot in the rhetoric. It's still student housing. You can put family in there. It's not much different than at UMass, the dorms that go back into a number of students in a roundabout situation with their own area to relax in and their own bathroom. But that's a dorm, and there will be students. It was advertised as student housing. That's what it is. They can call it whatever they want. It's in an effort to sell the product. It's still going to be students. And I doubt we'd have this problem if it had been presented as apartments for anyone. But it never was, and it won't be. There's too much money to pay for it. That's what's wrong. It's made for students, and it's made to flip. They have a history of flipping their property over in about 2 years' time and sell it for a big profit to somebody else who may not maintain it. And once it's there, it's there. It's done. And because of the bylaw, it's a precedent-setting event. So if Landmark can build dorms, and it's going to set a precedent for other developers who wanted to do this but couldn't because of the bylaw, because they're considered dormitories. And it's too far away from campus. It just is. In 1986, Henry Street was declared a scenic road by the Scenic Road Act of Massachusetts. And once it was to be widened out to 40 feet to get state funds. And all the trees were marked that we were going to lose. But the salamanders saved us. The Associated Press got a hold of the story, and it became well known, and we didn't want to lose the salamanders, and the town didn't either, and it was voted down. It just never happened for the betterment of us. So we've been in a lot of fights to stay the way we are. To compare us to Puffton Village that's not a viable argument. Probably Puffton Village does not vary by more than 2 or 3 feet in its level. It's certainly very level, very open. It was built as apartments for anyone, but gradually became a lot of student apartments because people didn't want to live in a family situation around a lot of the students. And there are still families there, I suppose, but it's largely students. And we're just barely hanging on to the state guidelines for single-family dwellings in Amherst. And certainly anything that Amherst town people the government might figure that they're going to make in taxes will certainly be decreased, because almost certainly if this is done, land values will go down. So it'll be assessed at a lower tax rate. And to take care of the highways and the sewerage and the water, and to maintain all of the roads, to take care of them, certainly they're going to be public roads. And that's going to offset any amount of profit that might possibly be made. So that's not a viable argument, I don't feel. And I'm a little unprepared tonight because I thought certainly it would spill over into next meeting. But this I feel is not going to be, it's going to be prohibitive to what we're about. Already they're talking about what can be done to widen the roads and to have more buses coming through per day. Just the amount of cars that would be allowed is going to impact this. So I think that I brought out in my letter to the committee, I do have one to you, that it's going to just change the whole climate of everything. And unfortunately, the students that want the most freedom are probably in the first 2 years of college. And I taught high school for a long time, and I know that kids coming out to school don't know very much about taking care of themselves in general because they just haven't had to. And they're going to want the freedom. And to afford that, you can have a single room, but you might have somebody sharing that room with you and be overcrowded to pay the rent. And certainly, just because you've got some parking doesn't mean that you're going to have the kids just park where they're supposed to. They'll park on the lawn if they have to. And some of the emergency roads, they'll park there too. They'll park anywhere they can. That's the nature of the way it goes. So I won't use any more of your valuable time with just moot points, but they are good points, and they're important to us. And there are people now that talk about making Amherst a city and saying we have the population to do it. Why not? Because it doesn't feel like a city. It probably won't feel like a city. But we've got a lot of fights ahead of us. So this is just one that we've got to win if we can. I don't know if there's a winner in this, but I don't think that anybody will win in Amherst who will let this happen. And I would certainly beseech you to not let this happen, because there's a lot of reasons. When Paul Jones gave the town the property for the water treatment plant, the agreement was an access to property where he could build it. He didn't have that entrance. So the water treatment plant property was that entrance. But not in my wildest desire, having known Walter Jones and Paul Jones, do I believe he had this in mind. He had a development, he had houses, but he didn't have this in mind. I can almost assure you of that. And in blasting for this, they moved 117,000 cubic yards of rock. And it took a long time. And this is just a small amount compared to the blasting that will have to take place there, and the grubbing and the removal and anti-conservation. I thank you for your time. I'm sorry to take so much of it. I hope we can beat this and not have it happen. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Acker. Yes, up front in the blue.
My name is Nancy Gittleman, and I live at 410 Old Montague Road, and I'm a landlord in Amherst. I've been a landlord for almost 20 years, and I don't rent to anybody under 30. I have enough stories that could fill a book, including students who were growing mushrooms in a closet that I found out about when the police showed up because somebody got stabbed. Two really nice boys from really nice families. I had met their parents, and I had no idea this was happening. To get this many students to move their cars when it snows, if there's an emergency, any kind of first responder, it will be almost impossible. They are not conducive to moving in a group. I think that the biggest issue, aside from the character of the town and everything else, is it's a dangerous proposition. I think it is going to be almost impossible to maneuver all the cars. I think you're talking about teenagers on high, steep grades, and I just think it's a crazy proposal. And I really hope that the planning board listens to the people of Amherst and does not allow Cinda Jones to be the Donald Trump of Amherst. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gittleman. In the suspenders.
Vincent O'Connor, Summer Street. For over a decade, I've represented this area. I've been a member of the Public Works Committee for 6 years within the last 10 years. And I was a member of the Amherst Housing Authority's Building Committee that cited three, among the duplex they cited in Amherst, 3 in Cushman. And I literally knocked on every door in Cushman many, many times in dealing with that. So this is a project way out of the scale of the 3 duplexes that the Amherst Housing Authority dealt with. And I'd like to suggest an approach for the board, which is that I believe that you should, in terms of the definitive subdivision plan, sharpen your paring knives, listen to the public about the issues involved in the project itself, the steepness of roads, the length of cul-de-sacs and so forth, and reduce the scope of the subdivision. And then listen to Mr. Hirsch and other people about the cluster subdivision issue when that comes before you. I don't think there's anything that's inconsistent with saying, okay, we can approve 83 lots. 83 lots can pass muster here, and then 2 months later, voting to no on the cluster subdivision issue, and that's the whole approach I would encourage you to take, because I think it's a rational way to deal with both and to protect the board from both litigation and accusations of being unfair. On some of the issues, I would, for example, encourage the board to designate all the exit entry roads as being secondary streets. If you look on page 5 of your subdivision regulations, section 9C, a minor road is defined in such a way that none of the exit entry roads meet that definition or can meet that definition, and therefore all the exit entry roads should be designated as secondary roads. With respect to the issue of preserving the natural landscape, the subdivision regulations require that all trees over 8 inches at caliper be designated on the plan. I think it would be reasonable for the board to, but in another section, in section 4, Roman numeral 4 of the subdivision regulations, it says that you'd like to have all trees over 12 inches in caliper preserved where that's possible. And what I think you want to do is ask the applicant to, in fact, locate such trees as still exist in areas where they plan to do work. Not obviously in open space areas or so forth, so that you can have a sense of what is there and what you would be being asked to approve in terms of elimination of large significant trees. So that, and those tree regulations are in 2 parts. One is the last section about preservation is in Roman numeral 4, C10. It does talk about trees and preservation of trees. So with regard to the yield plan, that is a specific issue. My view is that unless the applicant is willing to give you sufficient time to get information from the Conservation Commission regarding the final determination on wetlands, that any house lot where there is a question of whether the wetlands would allow it to be counted, that I don't think you have a choice but to eliminate that lot from the yield plan and therefore reduce the number of allowable lots on the site. So I think it's in the applicant's best interest to give you as much time as is necessary for you to get the results of the Conservation Commission determinations. On stormwater, provisions for stormwater, the requirement is the 100-year flood, or in the subdivision regulations, they talk about 4 inches in 2 hours. I think the real problem is that if we haven't had any recent storms, 4 inches of rain probably can be absorbed in 2 hours in most locations. The difficulty would come is if you had what is now the 100-year storm by all sorts of scientific paper. The regulations at the federal level haven't been changed, but there are more than sufficient scientific papers to say that the standard for the 100-year storm is now in New England 7 to 8 inches. And I would hope that if you receive papers to that effect, or if the staff researches them, that you insist that provision be made for that level of thing. And similarly for the road grades, I think that there are sufficient papers that show that anything over a grade of 8% in ice storms is a problem both for public safety vehicles as well as private passenger vehicles. There's a lot of information, and it's in a file that the town had when they created an access road on East Leverett Road to 5 private lots where the stems of the lots all converged for a single access driveway. In that access, there's all sorts of scientific research that was done by the engineering department that basically says 8% should be the limit, and I believe you should stick with that with regard to this subdivision.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Yeah, over there with your hand up. And I believe you'll be the last one tonight. If we didn't get to you tonight, we'll try to get to you next time. We're just out of time.
Thank you. Ira Addis, Shutesbury Road. Again, I want to thank the board for listening to the community's concerns. You have a written document that I submitted to you, and I will not go through that. There are a few things that I would like to mention.
Sir, could you speak into the mic?
Yeah, sure. There are a few things that I would like to mention. First, I've been following this issue for a long time, as well as you. I realize this is my opinion, not necessarily yours, but I think that the retreat is illegal according to Amherst zoning. I think it's a masquerade when it comes to this attempt to get it through as a cluster. I think it has already been shown today why it has nothing but almost contempt for Amherst's master plan. It's just totally inconsistent with the master plan. And I think it's a special interest-driven idea that's going to have disastrous consequences for the town if it's approved. I think when you step back and look at everything and get away from all the smoke and mirrors, and you look at the function of what's being presented to you, this is a huge rent by the room collegiate apartment complex, which is attempting to disguise itself as a cluster. And it's asking to be built in an RO zone district. And I know you started talking about this today. I hope you continue it. That's a zone that prohibits fraternities, sororities, similar use housing, apartment complexes, and rooming houses, as far as I'm aware. It's incompatible with the plan, and it will destroy Cushman. It will destroy the village of Cushman if it is built. It'll destroy the wildlife corridor, the watershed area. And there will be no community in Amherst with a 5-acre lot that a similar building cannot be built on if you approve this plan. And it's going to have disastrous consequences for zoning throughout the town. This whole thing's been a little Kafkaesque to me because I'm not sure I understand how it's gotten this far without more public opposition. And I would just ask you one question to ask of Landmark. I would like to know that in all of the previous retreat and retreat-like developments that have been built, how many units are currently occupied by the elderly? How many units are currently occupied by families? How many units are occupied by people who need low-income assistance? How many units have children in them? And how many units have handicapped people? I think if you ask that question and you listen to the answer, you'll see that this has no purpose other than housing collegiate undergraduates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Addison. And thank you, everybody, who commented tonight. And if we didn't get to you tonight, we'll try to get to you next time. We're not quite finished because we got to just make sure that we're wrapped up as far as what we're asking our consultant to look at and any questions staff may have. Yes, Ms. Brestrup.
I think there's a question about how much time the planning board has to review this project. And the last time you met, you asked me to look into the possibility of extending the time. It requires a request on the part of the applicant to extend the time past 90 days, and the current 90-day period expires as of August 26th. And so I wonder if you want to address that issue.
Mr. Reedy.
Thank you. Yes, we did have that discussion, Ms. Brestrup and I, and we have a request to extend the time from August 26th to September 26th, 30 days to start, and I guess we can see where the progress goes, and we appreciate your time with this discussion. I've also had another housekeeping matter is with our submission, we requested the return of the inspection fee, and then until approval, we would resubmit that inspection fee, and it's the inspection fee for the streets. And I think you're holding it, but that was part of the submission package, so just for housekeeping.
Thank you. So with respect to the continuance, as Ms. Brestrup said, we are required by law to render a decision one way or the other by August 26th unless we have an agreement to extend with you. So we would just ask that staff and the applicant put something in writing to that effect. Thank you very much. As to the return of that deposit, is that something that the board has the authority to do? Ms. Brestrup?
Yes, you do. If you vote to return that deposit on the inspection fee, then the collector will return it to the applicant.
So just for those watching at home who may not remember, we talked about this and we actually changed our rules a few weeks ago, I believe, on this very issue with respect to this, because the deposit that he's talking about applies to the final inspection of the roads of the project after they're built. And it was ambiguous in the bylaw whether that deposit was required at the time of subdivision approval, so they submitted it. The board subsequently discussed this particular rule and decided to clarify that, and anybody on the board can correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't have the cite to the correct rule, but that actually is not an appropriate time to collect that fee for any applicant, and that going forward, we would ask that the applicant submit that prior, after the roads have been constructed. Is that correct, Ms. Brestrup?
There's another section of the rules and regulations that requires the submission of the fee prior to the planning board endorsing the definitive subdivision plan. So when you get around to making a decision on this plan, if you choose to approve the plan at that time, prior to you are actually signing off on this, the applicant would be required to submit the fee.
So, as far as I'm concerned, if the applicant wants to have that money back during the interim, that's okay with me. It's not going to be used for anything in the interim, and it would have to be resubmitted before we sign the plan. I see no reason not to grant that as a courtesy, unless someone has a strong opposition to it. Okay, so we'll go ahead with, should we have a vote on that? Could we have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Just to be clear, we have a motion on the table to return the applicant's road inspection deposit. I'm using shorthand. Any further discussion? All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I would urge that any board members that have specific questions for our consultant about different things that we received, like the geotechnical report or the grades or the retaining walls, anything like that, that we submit those to staff who can transmit them to the consultant. All right, so we can address some of those at our next meeting. Mr. Rosnoy.
I'd just like to commend our consultant for doing such a grand job on such short notice, and I'm sure we're looking forward to a more definitive report when you have more time to look at all the details. But thank you very much.
I concur wholeheartedly. Thank you. Ms. Brestrup.
I wanted to ask if we could make a special request of the consultant to particularly look at the grading of the project and the walls, the retaining walls that are being proposed, and to comment on those.
So on the overall cutting and filling and the retaining walls. Ms. Anderson?
I'd like to add to that, somewhere where I was reading just even in the site preparation to achieve the grading, the depth of the excavations, in some areas are going to be 28 feet plus depths for utilities, which could be another 4 to 8. And so I would like to ask the impact, because it would, I don't know what I wrote somewhere in one of these pieces of paper on the timeline of, there was a piece of paper that said, this is how the project would work, and there were sort of 10 steps outlined, but it wasn't clear to me how long from, if this was to go forward from, the first shovel in the ground, so to speak, and my concern would be the impact to the neighborhood during the duration of the construction, given the amount of rock moving and blasting and I don't know, pile driving or whatever has to be done with a consultant.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Anyone else? Mr. Carson?
Yeah, I would find it very useful either for the applicant or our consultant to provide a graphic of where the retaining walls actually are and what the actual heights are at those particular places, just as that single graphic.
I agree with that, and I would also ask that of the applicant particularly. Mr. Tucker?
In terms of that, I would note that the staff development application report recommended for your consideration, requesting that there be sort of crow's view renderings, perspective renderings of the work, so that you would have a sense that would provide that information, but also a sense of the area of disturbance from the amount of work. There are proposals, for instance, where the retaining wall occurs, and then there's only 5 feet of proposed disturbance off the foot of the wall, which staff finds a little questionable. So we think it would be useful for you to be able to see sort of from the air what the consequences of the cutting and filling would involve.
See what you can do for us. I agree. It's very hard to visualize where this cutting and filling is going on, where these retaining walls are going to be, and so forth. Mr. Rosnoy?
I have a request about these proposed emergency roads. An opinion maybe as to their viability as an emergency road. The roadways are going to be subject to the grade requirements. It appears to me that the emergency roads may not be. And I just have this visual image of a big fire truck trying to get up a trap rock gravel road with snow and ice on it. But notwithstanding my image, something about the viability of those proposed emergency roads.
All right, anyone else? Mr. Stutzman?
So it's already been mentioned in our consultant's written statement. It's the only statement in bold about the trip generation statement in Puffton Village, and I'm sure that's going to be addressed by the applicant, but I just want to stress that for me that's very important and has the potential to move a lot of the pieces in this.
All right, I see no more immediate questions, but can certainly submit them. Thanks to the applicant and to everyone else for being here tonight and for your comments. For those of you who choose to join us, we'll be here again next week at the same time. Mr. Rosnoy?
Do we have to move to continue the public hearing to next week?
Yes, we do.
I so move, continue it to next week at approximately 7:45.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Carson, thank you. And thanks for attending to the procedural issue. Anyone all in favor?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. That carries unanimously. If everyone could please exit in an orderly fashion, we have to move on to other business, believe it or not. So thank you.
I want to know who's in charge of the air conditioning.
Why?
The reason I haven't spoken is I have lockjaw, I'm frozen.
Yeah,
It's
it's really
freezing.
cold in here.
Is anybody
I
else?
think it just went off.
Is anybody, did somebody
It
turn
was
it off?
freezing, yeah.
I feel like it's blowing.
I think it was turned off at 10 o'clock. 'Cause it's starting to feel uncomfortable. Yeah.
I need to do that.
That's true. Yeah.
Excuse me a moment. Here.
It's on my desk, and I haven't said anything.
Good night. Oop.
Try and keep it down next time, would you?
No, it is, yeah. So in other words, you could have sort of a business side and then.
I've only had to do that once in 6 years. Yeah. I really do, because there should be more.
I thought you could be
It wasn't. Sure.
Sometimes I feel crazy, but.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, good.
attention or something. We're all sitting here.
Still alive?
Part of the board's meditation session, we need to put that on the agenda.
You, the planning staff, private method?
This week's reading assignment will be Article 1 of the master plan.
Remember that law movie way back when? I'm sure you do. The Paper Chase?
Oh, yeah. Here's a dime.
Paper Chase.
That was a good movie.
It was a good movie.
And it's serious, too.
John Houseman.
This was good.
Apologize to those people watching at home. We're waiting for some people to return to the board and staff, so we're taking a short break.
I'll be home soon.
That's the movie where it said, here's a dime, just call your mother and tell her to be alert. That's from-
Something like that, something like
Some
that.
phone calls are done.
All right, so with all of us back again, thanks to everybody. That was really great.
Nice job moderating, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Let's get business and let's get out of here. We got to sign some decisions, right? So we have 3, Crocker Farm School, Fire and Water Yoga Studio, and Subway, right? Ms. Brestrup?
I have a confession that I didn't get Crocker Farm School done, but I think Mr. Bahanowitz is not in any hurry. So I have the Subway
I just
and the
proceed anyway, so.
Fire and Water, yoga, here for your signatures, and I also have the minutes.
It is the town after all.
Just go ahead and say it.
After 10, you can just say what you feel like saying.
That's the minutes.
That's when the real fun starts, is after 10.
Can we multitask while we're signing?
Yes. What would you like to talk about?
Is there any new business?
I think Mr. Tucker might want to talk about zoning.
That's under old business.
No, old business. Well, we're doing signing of decisions.
So you can talk about old business, Mr. Tucker.
Okay, thank you very much. The zoning subcommittee met last week, and you might, actually, the chair of the subcommittee might want to report on what happened there, and I can follow on that.
Mr. Crowner.
The zoning subcommittee started discussing, we don't want to lose any time, so we started discussing the multifamily housing amendment, not with the intention of bringing it to the fall, but just so that we have something to do while we're waiting for our consultants to finish work on inclusionary zoning and while we're waiting to set up a forum for parking. So the multifamily housing amendment has a large, at least as it was originally drafted, has a large section in the middle of it that is renumbering, reordering, cleaning up the special districts, trying to say, the
Overlays, or?
yeah, it collects the special districts and tells us how we interpret them and use them. The flood areas and the water protection areas and so on, special districts. If we want to put a new overlay on, we need to make room in that section. So there's a large section in there that doesn't have anything to do with multifamily housing that the board has previously expressed concern about bringing together at the same time. So we are probably going to ask the planning board to bring just that section, just the renumbering of that section to the fall town meeting. So that when we do bring multifamily housing, it will not be encumbered by any of that other stuff that is just housekeeping. So
I commend you for that. I think that sounds like a great idea.
And we will have more information on that next week.
Okay, thank you. Any other reports? Mr. Tucker. Yes, of course.
The subcommittee also reviewed and made a couple of final adjustments to the scope of services for the consultant for the inclusionary zoning consultancy, and approved them. And we had been exchanging emails with them. They have approved them as well, and will be sending signed copies to us for signature of the town manager, and away we go. I will be meeting tomorrow morning with the principal to go over that scope, and we anticipate that we will have more information fairly quickly. The subcommittee had set a sort of finish date of the end of August, the 27th, to receive the work, and we hope to get this done very quickly so that we have something to chew on to bring to the fall in terms of making final adjustments to the inclusionary zoning amendment.
Mr. Chair, may I inquire? I'm curious what the nature of the change in the scope of services was.
There was a change and an emphasis. The emphasis was about making sure that there was a sufficient amount of attention given to looking at non-zoning options, because it was felt that was important to have that bag of tricks should the financial feasibility element of the analysis prove that zoning alone was not sufficient in mixed-use centers. The other adjustment was a specific request to look at the financial implications of fees in lieu, and to analyze that, as Ms. Armington had done in the spring, to talk about, well, if you set it at this level, it will be okay. If you set it at the other level, it may be that all you get is fees in lieu and no dwelling units, which was something that the subcommittee and the citizens at the forum wanted to avoid, wanted to be able to get units out of it and not just fees.
So yeah, in particular at that forum, the issue that was addressed was that any type of fees or off-site type construction of units served to push affordable housing further into the future while allowing regular housing now. I believe that was a concern that was expressed by a number of people. So that's an important issue.
There was also the inclusionary piece of it too, that it's somewhere else. It's not. It's not where all the other housing is.
Right.
That's what I heard is the primary issue. Yeah.
Yeah, those were issues with both. Yeah. Ms. Anderson.
Mr. Crowner, you mentioned something about a parking forum. Could you just give a little soundbite on that? Parking, I perk up.
Yeah, so we recognize that the parking issue, particularly parking downtown, is more complex than just doing a zoning tweak. There are potentially other issues, other non-zoning options that might be pursued. There are different kinds of zoning that might be pursued. So rather than just jump in ourselves, we thought we would have a similar type forum like we had for inclusionary zoning a few weeks ago, have a similar type thing for parking, invite stakeholders, and lay the groundwork for building a series or at least one approach.
Any sense of when that might be?
Yeah, we're hoping to do that in late September-ish.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other old business? Or zoning? Okay. New business? A&Rs for tonight? That would be the world's biggest A&R sitting there, I think.
Two A&Rs next week.
Okay, 2 next week, all right.
We get previews.
I'm going to say that we skip over upcoming ZBA applications tonight because the hour, unless there's something pressing. Oh, okay, go ahead. What have we got coming up?
No, nothing.
Nothing.
I don't know of anything. I didn't have time to check today.
Okay. I was trying to let you off the hook anyway. Upcoming site plan reviews, I believe we have one next week, right?
There's Elm Electric next week, which is a generator on Amherst College property, and then there's Emily Dickinson Museum is doing a bunch of different things on their site, and they're going to be coming to you on September 3rd.
Wow.
Will there be an inspection?
Ah.
You know,
Site visit.
Yeah,
Site-
site visit?
Site
Oh,
visit, yeah.
wow.
I think that one will probably be well attended.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh, and,
Yep.
and we're also expecting the carriage shops to come in any day now. So,
The carriage shop housing?
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Called One East Pleasant.
is it?
Yeah.
One East Pleasant?
Yes, they decided to drop the place.
So this is mixed use?
Mixed use, yep. We'll
Wait a
prob-
second, so
We'll probably be receiving the application next week, so if you're interested, you can come and look at it.
And that'll be a site plan review?
Site plan review for a mixed-use building.
Mr. Tucker?
As you probably are aware in the papers and so forth, the mural is an issue on this, and the Historical Commission and the artist and staff are all involved, and town council is all involved in investigating the range of possibility. I think the developers are interested in preserving that as a feature. The question is what's physically feasible. Can you hold together a 1960s era cinder block wall while you're building a building behind it and excavating and doing everything else? And how do you fit that then into the face of a new building? Or, for instance, do you keep the old air conditioners that are in the windows in the middle of the mural, or do you remove those and paint something new? There's a bunch of questions. So that will be an element of what comes before you as part of the site plan review and any other permits that are associated with this project.
All right, thank you. So, no rest for the weary. We have plenty of things on our slate. Any committee reports that anybody wants to give tonight? Hearing none, I will give the report of the chair and thank Mr. Schreiber for chairing last week's meeting, and thank all of you for the vote of confidence and allowing me to continue to chair. It's an honor to do so and to serve with you all on this board. Any report of staff? Brestrup?
No report.
August 21st is the Quechee Scottish Festival in Quechee, Vermont.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. And we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr.